LoveLore Library. Chapter 117. Xiaoqing used Erdai's blood to mark Yan Pingshan, so that ordinary zombies would not attack him, and high-level zombies would also think thrice before acting, so Yan Pingshan's degree of safety was much higher. When doing all this, Xiaoqing did not hide it from Yan Pingshan, so Yan Pingshan immediately discovered it. He was stunned, pointing at Erdai, speechless. Xiaoqing held his finger, and said softly, "Forget everything you just saw. I treat you as a friend, and I don't want this matter to spread to other people's ears. If anyone knows that he is different from others, I will kill everyone who knows." Yan Pingshan was not angry because of the threat. Xiaoqing exposed this matter in front of him, which showed that Xiaoqing trusted him very much. At the same time, Yan Pingshan was clear about another thing, which was that Xiaoqing was extremely protective. If anyone knew that Erdai was a zombie, Xiaoqing would really kill everyone who knew. "Don't worry, I am not the kind of person who bites the hand that feeds me." Yan Pingshan took a deep breath, and could not help but feel that something was wrong. When he thought that he had been with a zombie for such a long time, he admired himself, and of course, he admired Xiaoqing even more. Yan Pingshan also imagined a lot of grudges, such as in the apocalypse, Xiaoqing lost her husband, Erdai protected her all the way to escape, but was bitten by a zombie. The person she loved had died, and Xiaoqing did not want to lose the person who loved her, so she risked the world and secretly raised Erdai, who had turned into a zombie. Who would have thought that Erdai did not lose his mind, and so on. Before he could finish his imagination, he was already stuffed into the car. Xiaoqing took Erdai, and ran all the way to the place where Mengshan was trapped. The place where they were trapped was very obvious, because there were too many zombies around, and the whole hospital was surrounded by zombies. Fortunately, Xiaoqing and Erdai were not normal people, so it was easy for them to blend in. There were more zombies inside the hospital, wandering around. Mengshan should be trapped on the top floor, and Xiaoqing took Erdai and quietly went up. After reaching the top floor, Erdai clung to the ceiling, and Xiaoqing hid in the shadows in the corner, secretly observing. Mengshan and the others were on the balcony, the top floor balcony, and zombies could only go through that door to reach the top floor. As long as a zombie showed its head, it would be smashed into pieces by the overwhelming power. This was also the reason why the zombies below had not broken through the top floor yet. No wonder when they were still outside the building, Xiaoqing saw a group of zombies hanging outside, like Spider-Man, desperately climbing to the top floor. It turned out that Mengshan and the others were on the top floor. From Xiaoqing's angle, she could not see Mengshan and the other's situation. After thinking, Xiaoqing told Erdai not to act rashly, and then she went out of the building through the window. Mengshan was leaning against the wall, resting. There was a wound on his handsome face, which was left by the zombie's claws. It was still bloody, and the flesh around the wound was exposed, which looked terrible. But he did not even have the strength to treat the wound, and sat there weakly. Just as he was resting, a vine suddenly wrapped around the railing next to him. Mengshan's first reaction was that a zombie was about to climb up, but then he found that the vine was very familiar. He opened his eyes wide, and even could not help but reach out to touch the vine. Then the silly Mengshan was stabbed by the vine's thorns, and then, he was poisoned. As soon as Xiaoqing climbed up, she saw Mengshan miserably lying there, moaning in pain. She quickly went forward, and then found that Mengshan was poisoned by her. Chapter 118. Xiaoqing was speechless. Xiaoqing had no choice but to detoxify Mengshan, and then helped him up. "Why are you here?" Mengshan gasped violently, and then asked in disbelief. "Didn't I say that I would come back to find you?" Xiaoqing looked around. Originally, they had 30 or 40 people, but now there were only a dozen left, and all of them were injured. Yan Ruru was a little better than Mengxin. She moved over and sighed. Are you stupid? Why did you come back? To die. Her eyes turned red as she spoke. Her relationship with Xiaoqing could only be said to be good. Before, she had some opinions about Xiaoqing's way of doing things because of her. Now, she was full of gratitude and sadness. Xiaoqing came back this time, wasn't it no different from dying? I met Yan Pingxin on the way. Now he has called for reinforcements. As long as we hold on until the reinforcements come, we will be fine. Xiaoqing said softly. Everyone was silent. Everyone knew that if they waited until Yan Pingxin found the reinforcements and brought them here, they might all be dead. After a long time, Mengxin said, Is he okay? Xiaoqing nodded. He is a little injured, but it's not a big deal. Mengxin pursed his lips and said to Xiaoqing, I don't know how you avoided those zombies and came here. Now, you should go back the way you came. We are the ones who dragged you down. Xiaoqing wanted to slap him, but she gave up. She sat down on the ground and said in a casual tone, Fighting with zombies, and your brain is out. Otherwise, how can you speak without thinking? Meng Pingxin's eyes widened. He wanted to refute, but after a while, he lowered his head dispiritedly. I'm serious. You should leave. From the very beginning, I approached you with bad intentions. Yan Pingxin too. We don't deserve this. Xiaoqing faintly nodded, then said, I know, but I didn't come back because of this. It's just that I accepted this mission, so I have an obligation to ensure your safety. That's all, don't think too much about it. After Xiaoqing said that, Mengxin looked at her, touched. Ah, Qing, you don't have to say that. I know. Although you look cold on the surface, you are more affectionate and righteous than those who are kind to you. If we can get out of here alive, I will swear to be your sworn sister. Who cares? Xiaoqing didn't care about her image and rolled her eyes. She was very helpless. People were strange these days. No one would believe her if she told the truth. Since Xiaoqing came to the roof, those people couldn't help but lower their heads. They didn't dare to look at Xiaoqing, because at the very beginning, Xiaoqing had suggested that they go back the way they came. They were greedy and wanted to speed up through the city, which led to the fatal disaster. 30 to 40 brothers, more than half of them died. The rest were struggling at death's door, hiding on the roof. They didn't know whether they would live or die in the next second. But there were also some people who complained in their hearts. Why didn't you persuade us more when you knew there was danger? If you had persuaded us more, maybe we would have gone back, and not so many people would have died. Why didn't you tell us the reason? Why didn't you tell us what kind of danger was ahead? Why did you bring your companions back, but not us? This was the deep-rooted bad habit of people. There were people like this who pushed all the mistakes to others. This kind of desperate situation also made some people crazy. There was a man who wasn't very tall, and he couldn't help but say, If you have a way to leave, then take us away. Is it because we offended you before, so you are like this? If you were willing to say more, willing to tell us about the danger ahead, we would definitely go back the way we came. Chapter 119. As soon as he spoke, Mengxin's face darkened. The key point was that there was someone who agreed with him. He was so angry that he wanted to throw this person down and let him see what kind of danger Xiaoqing took to save them. How could he have the face to say something like that? More and more people began to have this kind of understanding. Yes, why didn't Xiaoqing tell them about the danger ahead? If she had told them, they would have definitely returned. Everyone chose to ignore it. At that time, they were the ones who encouraged everyone to speed up through the city. They also chose to ignore Yan Pingxin's words. Xiao Qing suggested to return because she had a premonition that there was an unknown danger ahead. What's more, even if Xiao Qing knew what kind of danger was ahead and told them, would they really believe it? No one thought about it. When they were in a desperate situation, their hearts were filled with negative emotions. They chose to vent all their negative emotions on Xiao Qing. Xiao Qing's eyes were very cold, and finally became very deep. At this moment, she had made a decision. As long as Meng Xin, Yan Pingxian, and Yan Ruru reached the Jiangbei survivor base, this mission wouldn't be considered a failure, right? As for the others, what did it have to do with her? Therefore, in the face of this group of people who were destined to become corpses, Xiao Qing wasn't angry. It was stupid to be angry with dead people. Xiao Qing didn't lower herself to their level, but on the contrary, it encouraged their arrogance. More and more people began to complain, and the entire top floor was filled with complaints. Xiao Qing glanced through the guardrail. There were already many zombies climbing up, and some zombies fell down halfway and broke their bones. However, more zombies were slowly climbing up. Quiet. What time is it now? You are still like this. Touch your own conscience and ask yourself, who is the one who is wrong? Meng Xin stood up and said coldly. Those people instantly fell silent. Some of them began to reflect on themselves in shame, while some of them purely recalled Xiao Qing's combat prowess. I don't think we can stay on the top floor anymore. In the silence, Xiao Qing pointed downstairs and said. Everyone looked over and saw the group of zombies hanging on the windows. The zombies hanging outside the building were all evolved zombies. Their speed and jumping ability were very strong. They could easily jump up to a height of one floor and then grab onto the anti-theft windows of the next floor. Just like that, they climbed up floor by floor. Fortunately, the zombies were relatively stupid. They wouldn't climb directly from the window of the top floor to the balcony like Xiao Qing. They would only climb up floor by floor, so they still had some time to react. We can beat them down, a paranormal suggested. And then, some of you will guard the door of the balcony, and some of you will guard the edge of the roof. Then you will wait for those zombies to use up your superpowers and be surrounded by them. Xiao Qing sneered. Then what do you think we should do? A paranormal was not convinced. Xiao Qing didn't care. She just said, I have an idea, but I can't guarantee that everyone can go out alive. It's very dangerous. I'll tell you, and you can decide for yourself. Meng Xin nodded. Go ahead. I'll listen to you. Yan Ruru also said, yes, it's better to be dangerous than to wait for death here. My companion will come over. I'll ask him to create chaos in a while to attract most of the zombies' attention. Then we'll clean up those hanging outside the building and leave from the top floor with my vines, Xiao Qing said. This plan is very dangerous. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not. Meng Xin nodded at once. I'll go with you. Yan Ruru immediately supported her. I'll go with you, too. But will your companion be in danger? Those who were still yelling that it was too dangerous to stay on the roof and wait for rescue stopped talking. Xiao Qing comforted Yan Ruru. Don't worry. He has a special ability. He can leave safely. That's good. Yan Ruru frowned and then said, tell him to be careful. The Zombie King has been hiding in the zombie crowd. It didn't show up even when it was chasing us. It's very insidious. Xiao Qing nodded and then asked, is there anyone who wants to leave? Chapter 120. Should they choose to take the risk or stay on the roof and wait for help? Humans had a common problem, that is, they would always comfort themselves. They would rather hide on the roof and wait for death, and comfort themselves that someone would come to rescue them, than take the risk. In the end, only Meng Xin and Yan Ruru spoke. whether we live or die, I am willing to take the risk with you." Hearing their words, the people who had made up their minds to wait on the roof began to waver. Xiaoqing did not care whether they wavered or not. She jumped up and squatted on the guardrail. Yan Ruru immediately understood and shot out small fireballs, shooting down the zombies hanging outside the building. When the zombies were almost cleared, Xiaoqing tied the vines to the guardrail and jumped down first. She first went to the window on the roof, and after telling Dai her plan, she jumped out and hung outside the window, then grabbed the vines and flew down. After landing on the ground, Xiaoqing began to observe. After waiting for a while, the orderly zombies suddenly became chaotic and swarmed into the hospital building. When almost all the zombies had rushed in, Xiaoqing called Yan Ruru and the others on the roof. Meng Shen was the first to come down, followed by Yan Ruru, and then a few people followed. "Now run forward immediately, no matter what happens, don't stop." Xiaoqing said, "I will go to help my companions." "I will go with you." Meng Shen just finished speaking, but he was dragged away by Yan Ruru. "Do you want to be a burden? If you run faster, you will help Xiaoqing." Xiaoqing nodded, and then turned back into the building. The continuous howling of zombies made the gloomy hospital building even scarier. Xiaoqing went all the way to the roof, and saw Dai and a little girl in a floral dress confronting each other. The little girl looked to be 12 or 13 years old, wearing a dirty floral dress. The dress was full of traces of dried blood, dust, and other dirty things. The little girl's eyes were especially big, and on her dry face, they looked even more terrifying. She grinned, and the dense sharp teeth were like saw teeth, shining with cold light. There was a wound on Dai's face that was slowly healing, which should be left by this zombie. It should be the zombie king that was hiding in the city. When the female zombie saw Xiaoqing rushing over, she let out a sharp howl. The surrounding zombies immediately surrounded them. Dummy also let out a howl. Those zombies began to wander back and forth as if they were hesitating. High-level zombies could control low-level zombies, but what if there were two high-level zombies giving out opposite orders at the same time? Xiaoqing landed beside Dai, and looked at the zombie king vigilantly. Its turbid eyes rolled twice, and then fixed its gaze on Xiaoqing. Without any warning, the zombie suddenly appeared in front of Xiaoqing, and its sharp claws and fangs attacked Xiaoqing's throat. Xiaoqing didn't expect it to come so fast, and her throat was almost torn apart. Fortunately, Dai had seen the zombie's ability once, and timely blocked it. But even so, Xiaoqing's neck was still scratched with a not very deep wound, and Dumbo's arm was also scratched. She took a deep breath, and her eyes became cold and serious. The wound on Dai's face was caused by this. The vines flew out from Xiaoqing's hand, and tried to bind the zombie. But the zombie king's speed was very fast, and it left afterimages on the spot, as if it was teleporting, and dodged Xiaoqing's vines. Chapter 121. Dai tried to catch up with it, but Dai was not as fast as it. He was so angry that he was hopping on the spot. If that was the case, this zombie was not that scary. After all, speed was useless. Xiaoqing immediately knew why it was qualified to be a zombie king. Just as Xiaoqing was controlling the vines and trying to catch the zombie king, a black crack suddenly appeared beside her. The zombie king really teleported to her side. At that moment, Xiaoqing could not move. She could only watch the zombie king's black nails piercing into her stomach. Dai quickly rushed over. The zombie king's arm twisted around Xiaoqing's stomach and was about to leave. Xiaoqing finally regained her ability to move. She grabbed the zombie king's arm so that it could not leave her stomach. She used her other hand to hit the zombie king's face. Dai also went to the zombie king's back and hit its spine hard. The zombie king roared and disappeared in front of Xiaoqing. Dai's attack also missed. He hurriedly went to support Xiaoqing. He panicked and reached out to cover the wound on Xiaoqing's stomach. Xiaoqing grabbed Dai's shoulder and staggered to the mailbox window. Before the zombie king could react, they broke the window and jumped down. The height of 10 floors was enough to kill all zombies. However, the zombie king jumped down directly. When Xiaoqing fell halfway, she began to shoot out vines to hook the anti-theft window to slow down the fall. When she was close to the ground, she suddenly waved out a bunch of vines and hit the ground. The rebound made her want to vomit blood. However, the two of them successfully landed on the ground. The zombie king did not use any power to slow down the fall. When it was about to reach the ground, it disappeared in the air. When it reappeared, it was already beside Xiaoqing and Dai. Xiaoqing gritted her teeth. A vine combined into a thick whip and hit the zombie king's head. When it was about to move, countless thin daughters suddenly drilled out of its body. Xiaoqing took advantage of the moment when it was stiff and hit the zombie king away. Then, they ran forward without hesitation. As they ran, Xiaoqing controlled the vines to cover their backs. The zombie king kept roaring behind them, encouraging the zombies in the city to besiege Xiaoqing and Dai. In the end, it found that with Dai there, the zombies did not dare to surround them. It then gave up and kept flashing, chasing Xiaoqing and Dai. Lead it to an empty place in front. Xiaoqing's pain was very low, but there was a big hole in her stomach. She frowned because of the pain. Go to the front. Don't hold back. Let's leave it here forever. The reason why they didn't dare to make a move in the building was because Xiaoqing knew that even if the two of them could kill the zombie, it would definitely end with both of them suffering heavy injuries. The surrounding zombies would definitely not be merciful to them after they were seriously injured. When they reached a place where there were fewer zombies, the two of them could try their best to kill the zombie. Then, they could find an empty house to hide in and heal their wounds. The idea was good, but the reality was cruel. Xiaoqing and Dai just ran to an empty space when they saw Yan Ruru and Dai rushing over. Yan Ruru said anxiously, "Xiaoqing, we are here to help you. Are you hurt?" Fuck his mother. With Yan Ru and the others here, Dummy absolutely could not enter the state of madness and expose the fact that he was a zombie. She also could not use the part of the ability as a zombie, so her fighting power was greatly reduced. It would be wishful thinking to keep this zombie alive. Chapter 122. Let's go. Why did you come back? Xiaoqing gritted her teeth. Mengshen wanted to pull Xiaoqing back, but Dai slapped his hand away. He pulled back his hand and said, "We were worried about you. The zombie king is catching up with us. Let's go." Xiaoqing didn't have time to scold them. She pulled Dai and started running. The zombie king had caught up with them. It flashed and appeared beside them. One of them didn't have time to react. The zombie king clawed at his face. Its sharp black nails pierced into his eyes and cheekbones, crushing his head. Yan Ru set up a wall of fire and wanted to force her way through. Then, she was dragged away by Mengshen. The group of people fled frantically. From time to time, those who fell behind were easily killed by the zombie king. Neither the earth shield or the wind shield could withstand the zombie king's claw. It would only stop for a short while when it was killing people. That moment was the only time they could escape. Soon, only Yan Ruru, Mengshen, and Xiaoqing were left. Xiaoqing clenched her teeth and said, "We can't run anymore. If we keep running like this, we will be killed one by one. What should we do?" Mengshen gasped and asked in a low voice. "Fight with it. But we are no match for it." When we fight later, we should try to get out of the city. When we get to the river, it won't chase us anymore, Xiaoqing said in a low voice. You're right. It's too humiliating to run like this. Let's give it a try, Yan Ruru said fiercely. They briefly discussed the plan. Xiaoqing originally wanted to be the bait, but although she covered the wound on her stomach, Meng Xin could still see that she was powerless. Thus, the three of them immediately rejected the idea. In the end, Meng Xin became the bait. Meng Xin deliberately fell behind, and the Zombie King was tricked. Seeing Meng Xin fall behind, the Zombie King flashed to Meng Xin's side. At this moment, Meng Xin suddenly glared at the Zombie King, just like the stare of Medusa in the myths. The Zombie King suddenly paused for a moment, and then Xiaoqing detonated the daughter again, temporarily immobilizing the Zombie King's body. Meng Xin rolled forward and was picked up by Dummy. The place where the Zombie King was, however, was engulfed by a huge fireball. Is it dead? Yan Ruru gasped heavily, and then asked expectantly. She knew that the zombie wouldn't die so easily, but Yan Ruru couldn't help but imagine. The fireball dispersed, revealing the Zombie King's pitch-black body. Its clothes were all burned away, and its skin and flesh were charred black. Only a pair of large eyes remained. When it turned, most of the whites of its eyes could be seen. It looked very scary. Air dye landed from the sky and kicked the Zombie King's neck. With a cracking sound, the Zombie King was kicked away again. However, no one dared to attack it while it was weak, because they all knew that it was at least a level 5 Zombie King. That kind of attack wouldn't be fatal to it. On the contrary, if they rushed forward, they might be seriously injured, or even, therefore, after tricking the Zombie King, Xiaoqing immediately took her friends and ran as fast as they could. They ran even faster than rabbits. Every time the Zombie King was about to catch up with them, they would set up a plan. They would let one of them be the bait, and then trick the Zombie King. Just like that, they ran for an entire afternoon. Everyone was exhausted and on the verge of collapse. The Zombie King was also much smarter. It wandered behind them and no longer took the initiative to approach, like a cat playing with a mouse. Chapter 123. We're about to leave the city. Xiaoqing comforted Meng Xin and Yan Ruru. She and Air Dai were doing better than Meng Xin and the others. After all, they were not living people, so their stamina was naturally better than Meng Xin and the others. Meng Xin and Yan Ruru had truly reached their limits. This was especially true for Meng Xin. His leg had been injured when he was acting as bait. Thus, he was also the one who had exhausted the most physical strength among all of them. The closer they got to the edge of the city, the more irritable the zombie became. It was originally following behind them leisurely, but now it had started to try to kill them many times. Once they left the city, Yanjiang would be right in front of them. After they entered the water, the zombie would definitely not take the initiative to follow them. We'll be safe soon. Xiaoqing encouraged them. Hold on for a little longer. Meng Xin's breathing was like an old bellows that was constantly being pulled. It sounded very painful. He was supported by Air Dai and Yan Ruru on both sides. His left leg dragged on the ground, and large drops of cold sweat dripped down from his forehead. Why don't you put me down? Meng Xin said in a low voice. I have a way to delay it for a little while. You guys hurry up and run, shut up. Yan Ruru glared at him and dragged him forward with great effort. Xiaoqing's superpower was exhausted again. She didn't care about the negative effects of swallowing crystals on her body. She grabbed a handful of crystals and swallowed them into her stomach. The crystals were quickly absorbed by her body. The sudden burst of power made a trace of thick black blood drip from the corner of her mouth. Xiaoqing quickly wiped away the blood and released the vines behind her. Look! Yan Ruru suddenly opened her eyes wide and pointed not far away. It's Yan Jiang. They had unconsciously run out of the city and were now very close to Yan Jiang. Yan Ruru was so happy that she almost jumped up. She couldn't help but speed up. They saw hope, but the zombie king began to go crazy. It roared and no longer lingered at the back. It suddenly pounced on them. Xiaoqing was at the back of the group and was directly pounced on. She rolled with the zombie and shouted, "I have a way to get out of here. You guys run first. Once we reach Yanjiang, we will be safe. Go!" Meng Shen looked back and roared hysterically. He ran towards Yanjiang, who was only a few hundred meters away. Xiaoqing stabbed her arm into the zombie's chest. The zombie stabbed her stomach again. The woman and the zombie rolled on the ground. Drops of almost black blood were spilled. This kind of thick and dark blood was unique to zombies. It was very rare. However, as the woman and the zombie fought, the blood spilled all over the ground. Xiaoqing was a little dizzy. She could feel that her organs were rupturing. Then, with her high recovery ability, they slowly recovered. However, her physical strength and superpower couldn't keep up. Xiaoqing tightly restrained the zombie king and didn't let it attack Air Dai and the others. At this time, Air Dai and the others were infinitely close to Yanjiang. The zombie king roared and tore Xiaoqing's abdomen with its claws. Xiaoqing didn't let go. She bit the zombie king's throat like a crazy person. The rotten meat had a fishy smell. Thick zombie blood flowed down her throat and into her mouth. That kind of smell made her want to vomit even though she had a weak sense of taste. The zombie king was also roaring crazily. Its claws scratched Xiaoqing's back until it was a bloody mess. Xiaoqing's vision was getting blurry. She hugged the zombie king tightly and looked at Air Dai. Air Dai seemed to be trying to run back. She wanted to shout, "Don't come back. Go, go." Yan Ruru pulled Air Dai, but Air Dai shook him off. He quickly ran over. His pale face was full of panic. He was afraid of losing her, even if he didn't know what death was. The zombie king suddenly disappeared from Xiaoqing's arms. Xiaoqing fell to the ground powerlessly. She looked at the zombie king that appeared out of thin air not far in front of her and pounced on Dummy. She wanted to get up, but she didn't have the strength. She even had an illusion that if she moved, her organs would flow out from the big hole on her stomach. However, Air Dai was no match for the zombie king. Xiaoqing watched Air Dai being hit and the zombie king running in the direction where Air Dai landed. Yan Ruru, who was about to reach the river, suddenly pushed Mengshan forward and turned back to save Air Dai. They were a bunch of idiots. Extremely stupid. Xiaoqing closed her eyes. She seemed to feel that the corners of her eyes were wet. Didn't they say that zombies didn't have tears? She used her arms to support herself and got up from the ground. She staggered a step and knelt on the ground again. Perhaps in the eyes of Gu Panpan and the others, she was an invincible existence. No matter what kind of difficulty or danger she faced, she could handle it. But the fact was, she was just a person who was slightly stronger than ordinary people. Now, she couldn't even save the person she wanted to save. Air Dai was even more desperate. He didn't know what death was. He only knew that he had to save Xiaoqing. Even if he was hit easily, the first thing he did when he got up was to run in the direction of Xiaoqing. Yan Ruru hugged Air Dai with tears in her eyes and dragged him in the direction of Yanjiang. They were just a few steps away from the river. Then, they would be safe. However, the zombie king had already rushed over. At the critical moment, Air Dai suddenly pushed Yan Ruru and pushed Yan Ruru into the river. Then, he turned around and rushed towards the zombie king. He roared towards the sky. His beautiful eyes were quickly dyed red. Then, his long nails and bulging muscles appeared. In this state, Erdai and the zombie king collided at high speed. Erdai was sent flying again. The sound of his bones breaking was clear and terrifying. Erdai was limp on the ground. His red eyes looked at Xiaoqing reluctantly. The best memory he had was of her holding his hand and trimming his nails bit by bit. Her hands didn't have any warmth, but he felt warm. It was as if his heart was touched. He wanted to keep that warmth forever. Just as Erdai gave up struggling, he saw a heavily injured figure hug the zombie king. In the next second, countless vines wrapped around the two figures and suddenly tightened. The sound of bones breaking was heard continuously. In the end, the green figure fell into the river. It only poked its head out for a moment before it was washed away by the river. Dummy roared at the top of his lungs. Half of the bones in his body were already broken. He couldn't get up at all. He tried his best to wriggle in Yan Zhang's direction. He roared again and again. Finally, he shouted hoarsely and vaguely, "Qing." If Xiaoqing heard him, she would definitely hug him tightly. Erdai used the last of his strength to jump forward and fell into the river. He really didn't want to lose that kind of warmth. Chapter 124. But soon, the person who saved her arrived. Someone rang the doorbell, and Yan Qiue reluctantly went to see who it was. Xiaoqing took the opportunity to curl herself up in bed, preparing to sleep a little longer. When sleeping, all the body functions were in a dormant state, and injuries recovered the fastest. She secretly curled up in bed, so naturally, she missed everything that happened downstairs. It was a young man who knocked on the door. He looked about the same age as Yan Qiue and was very handsome. As soon as Yan Qiue opened the door, her face darkened. "What are you doing here?" The man walked in with familiarity, poured himself a glass of water, and sat on the sofa. "I heard that you brought a wife back. What do you want to play this time?" Yan Qiue sat on the sofa lazily and said in a cold voice, "It's my business to have a wife. There's no need to report it to you." The man narrowed his eyes and smiled. "I'm just curious. Why did a cold-blooded, cold-hearted person like you suddenly bring a wife back?" Yan Qiue was very calm. "Isn't it normal to get married and have children when you're old?" "Qiao Mo, you're meddling too much. I told you very clearly at that time that we're just partners. You provide the money, and I provide the labor. You have no right to interfere with my private affairs." Yan Qiue was very straightforward, but the man acted as if he didn't hear her. He was still smiling. "Dating will affect your work. Besides, as a friend, can't I ask about your wife?" Yan Qiue didn't speak, but the words, "Who's your friend?" were clearly written in her eyes. Okay. I'm mainly here to tell you that the results of the first batch of experiments have come out. They've tested the effect, and it's very successful," the man said very seriously. "I'll follow up right away." Yan Qiue thought as she spoke. She didn't know if Xiaoqing had woken up. She couldn't run down rashly, or it would be easy to find out that she was a zombie. If the man in front of her found out that Xiaoqing was a zombie, then there was only one result waiting for Xiaoqing: death. After chatting with Qiao Mo for a while more, Yan Qiue sent him off. Before he left, Qiao Mo insisted on treating Yan Qiue and Xiaoqing to a meal, which Yan Qiue rejected in every possible way. After Qiao Mo left, Yan Qiue returned upstairs and saw Xiaoqing lying in bed, wrapped in a cocoon. Xiaoqing was very good-looking. When she was lying quietly in bed with a relaxed expression, she was even more attractive. At least, she was so for Yan Qiue. He knelt by the bed and pressed his face against Xiao Qing's hand. He couldn't help but imagine Xiao Qing stepping on him. It would be best if she could humiliate him or even hit him. As he thought about it, Yan Qiyu had a reaction. Then his eyebrows became a little gloomy. His fetishes were indeed different, probably related to his childhood experience. It was said that people who were often treated violently when they were young had a great chance of becoming abusers, and also a great chance of becoming masochists. He was the latter. Yan Qiyu was an orphan who stayed in an orphanage for a long time. Because of his unsociable personality, he was bullied a lot. Later, he was adopted. His adoptive parents weren't good people. His adoptive father often vented his anger on him, and his adoptive mother would also pinch his inner thigh when she was angry. The skin on his inner thigh was almost never intact. Later, his adoptive mother ran away with someone else. His adoptive father would get drunk every day and beat him when he was drunk. Sometimes he would use his fist, sometimes he would use a wine bottle. When he was angry, he would even break a chair on Yan Qiyu's back. Chapter 125. Bodyguard D, what's the point of talking so much? Do you have the guts to save that girl? If you don't, just follow us. Don't let Yan Qiyu hear what we're talking about. In fact, Yan Qiyu heard everything. He glanced behind them, then put his chin on Xiao Qing's shoulder and said, "Baby, listen to what they're saying." Xiao Qing looked at him and felt that he was cute. She couldn't help but stroke his head. Yan Qiyu immediately rubbed his head against Xiao Qing's palm. He narrowed his eyes and looked very obedient. The group of bodyguards behind them were shocked. Was the man in front of them really Yan Qiyu, the devil? Was he really not replaced by someone else? Or maybe he was possessed by some strange thing. However, they didn't dare to talk about it anymore. Who knew if Yan Qiyu would get angry? It was said that Yan Qiyu had a nanny at the beginning, who was arranged by Qiao Mo. However, one night, for some reason, the nanny annoyed Yan Qiyu, or she saw something she shouldn't have. It was said that when Yan Qiyu threw the nanny out of the door, her body was broken into pieces and couldn't be picked up. They could only sweep it into a pile and shovel it away. Although they were all elites in the base, if they really angered Yan Qiyu and got killed, no one would stand up for them. In fact, Qiao Mo might even kill the person who angered Yan Qiyu first as an apology to her. Because Yan Qiyu was too important, every paranormal in the base was equipped with a kind of medicine. After taking it, their strength would be greatly improved temporarily, but it could only last for an hour. After that, they would be weak for a day. However, this medicine was simply a life-saving treasure when they were in danger. Since this medicine was invented, the death rate of the entire base during missions had been greatly reduced. This medicine was invented by Yan Qiyu. The people in the base jokingly called it the invincible little pill. If they couldn't take it, they would activate the invincible pill. Therefore, for the base, Yan Qiyu was more precious than a panda. No one dared to do anything to Yan Qiyu. However, Yan Qiyu was very arrogant. There were many people who didn't like him. Yan Qiyu took Xiao Qing to walk around the garden. He couldn't help but pick up a few flowers and weave a ring for Xiao Qing. His fingers were flexible, so the ring he weaved was very beautiful. He put it on Xiao Qing's finger. Although it was made of flowers and plants, it was very unique. Among the men that Xiao Qing had met, the one who clung to her the most was Dai. Dai was ignorant and didn't know how to please her at all. Therefore, Xiao Qing felt that it was quite novel and let Yan Qiyu put it on for her. The two of them walked around for a while more. Then, Qiao Mo found someone to call Yan Qiyu. Yan Qiyu frowned. He was very unhappy to be disturbed. However, he and Xiao Mo were partners, so he couldn't not give him face. He reluctantly grabbed Xiao Qing's hand and said, "Wife, sit here for a while. I'll be back soon." He walked away, looking back repeatedly. He left 2 bodyguards to protect Xiao Qing. In order to prevent others from discovering that Xiao Qing was different from others, he specially instructed the bodyguards to not let anyone near Xiao Qing. After Yan Qiuao left, Xiao Qing sat on a stone bench and twirled the ring on her finger in boredom. Ever since she was injured, she was especially sleepy. She would sleep for more than half of the day. Moreover, she didn't want to get up if she didn't have to. After sitting for a short while, Xiao Qing felt a little sleepy. She supported her face with one hand and held a small white flower in her other hand. She lazily looked at the layers of white flowers not far away. This kind of flower was called a bamboo joint because its stem was like a bamboo. It was jointed, and the flower at the top had 6 petals. The flower was very small. Even in the cold winter, even on the peak of a snowy mountain, it would still bloom as usual. Chapter 126. That was why this flower was also called hope. Xiao Qing looked at the sea of flowers, but she was thinking about Dai and the others. The zombie king had fallen into the water with her. Without the zombie king in the city, the zombies would definitely be defeated. No zombies would chase after Dai and the others. In addition, Yan Hanqing and the others had been waiting for Xiao Qing for a long time. They would definitely go into the city to search for her. They would be able to help Dai and the others. Therefore, Dai would definitely be fine. She was only afraid that Dai, that stubborn person, would jump into the river with her. With Dai's temper, the possibility of that happening was very high. If Dai also jumped into the river, who knew where he would be swept to? It would be very difficult to find him. Xiao Qing was not worried about Dai's safety. He was a zombie like her. As long as his head was not injured, no matter how serious the injury was, it would heal one day. If he just jumped into the river, he would definitely be fine. Perhaps she should go to Jiangbei Survivor Base. Perhaps after Dai woke up, he would go to Jiangbei Survivor Base or go back to S-City Survivor Base. If Dai could not be found in either of these places, then Xiao Qing could only look for Dai everywhere. Just as Xiao Qing was in a daze, a few people approached her. However, they were stopped by the bodyguards. "Did the 2 of you eat a leopard's guts? How dare you stop me? Do you believe that I won't beat you to death?" The girl who walked over looked like she was in her 20s. Although she was good-looking, she was dressed very unconventionally. There were also a few bodyguards following beside her. Bodyguard A did not intend to move aside. He said honestly, when Master Yan left, he said that no one is allowed to come close. "Miss, even if you want to kill us, we can't let you come close." The girl was furious. She slapped Bodyguard A directly. "Who do you think you are? How dare you stop me? Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Scram! Bodyguard A frowned slightly. No matter what, he was still a level 3 metahuman. How could he be humiliated like this? Even if the girl was Qiao Mo's sister, it was still too much. Qiao Yu didn't think that she had gone overboard. Her brother was the most powerful person in the base. In the past, he was equivalent to the president of a country. She was the sister of the leader of the base. Who had the right to stop her from doing whatever she wanted? Even if there was, it shouldn't be these 2 people. They were just a few bodyguards. To put it bluntly, they were dogs that Xiao Mo had given to Yan Qiue. She could hit them if she wanted to. Did she have to report to him if she wanted to hit a dog? Bodyguard B silently stepped forward and blocked Xiao Yu's path. Their intentions were obvious. They didn't want her to go over. Charles' tone was deadly. He pulled out a gun and pointed it at Bodyguard A. Do you really think I'm joking? The atmosphere immediately became tense. If Xiao Yu wanted to shoot, the two bodyguards definitely wouldn't sit still. They were only hired by Xiao Mo. It wasn't as if they had sold their lives to him. Even if a fight broke out, Xiao Mo wouldn't do anything as long as they didn't go overboard. After all, Xiao Yu was the one who started it. Xiao Yu had the temper of a rich young lady, but Xiao Mo didn't. If Xiao Mo punished them for this, he would definitely lose a lot of people's hearts. Therefore, the two bodyguards weren't worried about a fight breaking out. When Xiaoqing heard the quarrel, she raised her head slightly and looked over. Xiaoqing's appearance was very outstanding. Even her cold aura only added to her brilliance and made people feel that she couldn't be blasphemed. Xiao Yu had a grudge against Yan Qiue. This time, she deliberately came to pick a fight when she heard that Yan Qiue had brought back a girl she liked. The moment she saw Xiaoqing, Xiao Yu's originally angry mood was mixed with jealousy. Even Xiaoqing's cold aura became fake arrogance in her eyes. Chapter 127. Thus, the flames of war that were about to die down reignited in an instant. Xiao Yu seemed to be shooting at Bodyguard A, but the bullet was actually aimed at Xiaoqing. Bodyguard A was shocked and quickly formed a wind shield to block the bullet. It didn't matter if he was injured or if he offended Xiao Yu, but he couldn't let Xiaoqing get hurt. If Xiaoqing got hurt, Yan Qiue would definitely skin them alive when she returned. What are you guys still watching for? Go! Xiao Yu stomped her foot and the bodyguards around her swarmed forward. Miss, sorry for the offense. The two bodyguards gritted their teeth and started fighting with the bodyguards. After all, the other party had the advantage in numbers. Although the two of them were temporarily tied with the bodyguards, they didn't have the time to take care of Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing didn't care about the situation on the other side. Instead, she plucked a yellow chrysanthemum flower and tore it petal by petal. As she tore, she muttered in her heart, Jiangbei Survivor Base, S-City Survivor Base. When Xiao Yu saw that Xiaoqing was ignoring her, her temper exploded. She shot at Xiaoqing, but the two bodyguards couldn't stop her. Xiaoqing frowned slightly. She stretched out her hand and a ball of green light enveloped her palm. Then, she easily caught the bullet as if she was picking up a melon seed. You, go over and grab her. Xiao Yu ordered the bodyguard beside her. Immediately, one of the bodyguards left the group and walked towards Xiaoqing. He was quite ruthless. He probably thought that Xiao Yu didn't like Xiaoqing and wanted to show off in front of her. He deliberately reached out his hand to grab Xiaoqing's shoulders. This way, he could dislocate the joints on Xiaoqing's arms if he exerted some force. Xiaoqing looked at him expressionlessly. She was now a level 4 paranormal and had just swallowed a level 5 zombie core. Although most of the core's energy was used to repair her body, the remaining energy was enough for her to advance from a beginner to an intermediate level 4 paranormal. This man had just broken through to the peak of level 2, and his realm wasn't stable yet. How dare he try to capture her? Xiaoqing narrowed her eyes. Her eyes were bloodthirsty. She stretched out her hand, and green vines rose into the air, forming a green cage and trapping the man in the middle. He still tried to struggle, but a layer of flames appeared on the surface of his body. Then, the cage slowly tightened. It was not afraid of the layer of flames on the surface of his body at all, and firmly bound him. Furthermore, the vines continued to tighten, cutting into the surface of his skin. The sharp thorns pierced into his flesh, and traces of blood flowed out. If it weren't for Xiaoqing controlling the vines and not injecting the poison into his body, he would have turned into a puddle of liquid by now. Xiao Yu's eyes widened. Xiao Qing could control a level 2 paranormal in a second, which meant that she was at least a level 3 paranormal. Although the paranormal had underestimated Xiao Qing, he was very close to level 3. Xiao Qing glanced at Xiao Yu and curled her lips. She had already injected some wood energy into the paranormal's body with the vines. Although it was only a small amount, the energy quickly entered the man's brain through his meridians and attached itself to the alien energy in his brain. Xiao Qing had imitated the daughter and planted a seed in the man's alien energy. As long as he tried to break through to level 3, the seed would grow rapidly and destroy the alien energy crystal. She was still experimenting with this trick, so she wasn't sure if it would work. Let him go. Qiao stomped her feet. The guards her brother had given her were all useless. They couldn't even do anything to Xiao Qing. Chapter 128. Xiao Qing didn't say anything. She waved her hand, and the vines binding the man turned into a whip. She held it in her hand and swung it forcefully, causing the man to roll a few times before landing at Xiao Yu's feet. Xiao Yu kicked the scarred man. Trash. She knew that she couldn't do anything to Xiao Qing today, but she was still unwilling to give up. She said, of all the people you could cling to, you had to cling to that pervert Yan Qiue. You're really despicable. I want to know what kind of seductive tricks you used to charm that pervert into bringing you home. Why don't you show me a live performance? Why don't you show me a live performance? Yan Qiue's cheeks were slightly red from running, and he was still a little out of breath. After he finished talking to Qiao Mo, he ran over. He didn't expect to hear Qiao Yu humiliating Xiao Qing as soon as he arrived. The anger in his heart immediately ignited, and he couldn't wait to tear Qiao Yu into pieces. The two bodyguards immediately retreated and stood on either side of Yan Qiue. When Xiao Yu saw Yan Qiue, a trace of fear flashed through her eyes. Then, she quickly raised her head. Yan Qiue, don't think that you can be lawless just because you've gained my brother's trust. Oh. Yan Qiue's lips curled into a faint smile with a trace of bloodthirstiness. He took 2 steps forward, and Xiao Yu immediately took a step back. Then, she felt that she seemed a little cowardly, so she immediately braced herself and took another step forward. At this time, Yan Qiue was already in front of her. A few bodyguards immediately surrounded Xiao Yu, afraid that Yan Qiue would make a move. Yan Qiue made a move, but it wasn't towards Xiao Yu. Instead, it was towards one of the bodyguards beside her. Yan Qiue only stretched out his hand and clenched his fist. Then, he saw the bodyguard beside Xiao Yu explode. Blood and minced meat splattered all over Xiao Yu. She was stunned. After all, Qiao Mo had protected her very well. Even during the apocalypse, she had never seen such a bloody scene. The other guards also took a step back in fright. Xiao Yu's legs went soft all of a sudden. Her nose was filled with the thick smell of blood, and her face and body were covered with minced meat. The strong smell made her hold her stomach and vomit. Xiao Yu, I'm not doing anything to you because you're Qiao Mo's younger sister. I'm giving Qiao Mo some face. However, if you cross my bottom line, I'll still make a move against you. At worst, I'll just change bases. As long as I say the word, there are countless bases willing to welcome me back. So, don't provoke me. Yan Qiue squatted down and smiled at Xiao Yu. Because of the fluctuation of his emotions, the mole appeared at the corner of his eye again. It was like a drop of bright red blood, extremely enchanting and charming. Even though there was a pool of blood under his feet, Yan Qiue was still calm. He rubbed Xiao Yu's head, then suddenly pressed the back of her head, pressing her face into the minced meat on the ground. His voice carried a faint killing intent. What's more, you're provoking my wife. This is the first time, and I hope it'll be the last time. Xiao Yu was sprawled on the ground. Her mouth and nose were filled with minced meat and blood, mixed with her vomit. Xiao Yu was dumbfounded. She had never suffered so much in her life. Although she was angry, she was more afraid than anything else. She could feel the killing intent emitted from Yan Qiue when he said he wanted to kill her. He really wanted to kill her. Xiao Qing stepped forward and pulled Yan Qiue back. It wasn't that she pitied Xiao Yu, but that she couldn't suppress her bloodthirsty impulses. Yan Qiue looked at Xiao Qing with concern. "You're not hurt, right?" Xiao Qing pulled him back. Yan Qiue glanced at Xiao Yu and waved to the 4 bodyguards. Then, he was dragged away by Xiao Qing. Chapter 129. Xiao Qing couldn't stand it anymore. She stepped forward and pulled up his pants. Yan Qiue, who had a serious look on her face a second ago, turned shy in the next second. She even looked gentle. Xiao Qing felt that Yan Qiue would definitely become a pervert if she stayed with him for a while longer. How to subdue a pervert? The answer was, be more perverted than him. Xiao Qing originally wanted to leave Yan Qiue alone and let him think about his life and future. Then, Yan Qiue's stomach hurt again. It was probably caused by his irregular diet in the past. His stomach hurt every 2 or 3 days, and if it got worse, he would have gastric bleeding. Yan Qiue's face was pale. He curled himself up like a prawn. Sweat kept dripping from his forehead, and his long eyelashes, which were like butterfly wings, trembled slightly. He looked pitiful. Xiao Qing sighed secretly and pressed Yan Qiue into her arms. Her hands were cold, so she had no choice but to use Yan Qiue's hands to rub his lower abdomen. She had already considered finding a doctor to check him. According to common sense, the body of an ordinary paranormal shouldn't be so weak. However, Yan Qiue had been torturing himself all year round and didn't care about his body. As a result, he became like this. After rubbing for a while, Yan Qiue looked much better. Xiao Qing was about to boil a bowl of soup for his stomach. He should feel better after drinking a bowl of hot soup. She was just about to get up when Yan Qiue hugged her tightly. Don't go. Hold me for a while." Xiao Qing's body was cold and lifeless, but Yan Qiue liked her hug. He felt cherished and cared about. Even if his body was cold, his heart was warm. Xiao Qing sat back helplessly and looked at the man in her arms. Yan Qiue was probably afraid that she would leave, so he hugged her tightly and buried his face in her lower abdomen. Yan Qiue's appearance was very beautiful. Probably because he had been in the research room all year round, his skin was exceptionally white, and it was easy to leave marks on it. Because of the pain, he looked a little fragile, and his facial features were much softer. Xiao Qing unconsciously looked at him for a long time. If it was in the past, Xiao Qing would never have believed that she would actually get used to being pestered by a pervert, sleep with a pervert, and finally think that a pervert was very cute. Then, she accompanied him to become a pervert. When Yan Qiue fell asleep, Xiao Qing went downstairs and prepared to cook some soup for Yan Qiue. When she came downstairs, she saw a man sitting on the sofa. Unlike Yan Qiue's flamboyant beauty, this man was outstanding and handsome, but his eyes were full of playfulness. Xiao Qing acted as if she didn't see him and went straight to the kitchen. Qiao Mo was stunned for a moment, and the playfulness in his eyes turned into interest. Originally, he just wanted to see what kind of woman could conquer Yan Qiue, such a monster, and endure Yan Qiue's temper. Then, he realized that Xiao Qing was more interesting than he had imagined. When Xiao Qing finished cooking a pot of chicken soup and brought it out, Qiao Mo was still sitting there. Xiao Qing acted as if she didn't see him and walked upstairs while thinking about what soup to cook next. Qiao Mo couldn't help but call out to her from behind, Yan Qiue's wife, can you at least pay attention to me? Xiao Qing frowned slightly and pointed to her throat before going upstairs. Qiao Emo raised his brows. He wasn't angry or frustrated. He leaned back and waited patiently. Xiao Qing went upstairs. Yan Qiue was lying in bed in a daze. He woke up after sleeping for a while, and the empty space beside him made him feel insecure. Chapter 130. While he was in a daze, Xiao Qing came over with a bowl of steaming hot soup. Yan Qiue immediately beamed with joy. Baby, did you make this soup especially for me? Xiao Qing answered softly. She hadn't spoken for a long time, so her voice was a little hoarse. Yan Qiue was stunned when he heard it. If it were any other person, they would definitely feel that they were deceived by Xiao Qing, but Yan Qiue didn't think so. He thought that Xiao Qing didn't hide it from him because she treated him as one of her own. With this thought, Yan Qiue felt much better. He couldn't help but move forward. Baby, can you feed me? Xiao Qing couldn't help but have blue veins pop on her forehead. She gritted her teeth. Seeing that this pervert was uncomfortable, she endured it. Xiao Qing's face stiffened, while Yan Qiue's face was flushed with success. He finished a bowl of soup. When Yan Qiue finished the soup, Xiao Qing said concisely, "Someone came downstairs." Yan Qiue immediately knew who had come. He snorted coldly and pulled Xiao Qing along, saying, "Let's go. I'll go get an explanation for you." It's time for him to discipline his arrogant and despotic younger sister. When Yan Qiue pulled Xiao Qing downstairs, Qiao Mo looked up and saw that Yan Qiue was wearing a simple white shirt. There was a beautiful whip mark at the collar, which looked especially erotic. His face immediately stiffened. Then, he realized that Yan Qiue didn't have any intention of hiding it. He openly held Xiao Qing's hand and sat down. "What are you doing here?" Yan Qiue leaned against Xiao Qing like a little bird, which made Qiao Mo's face stiffen again. He hesitated for a long time before saying, "Congratulations." He knew a little about Yan Qiue's special fetishes. At first, he sent a nanny over. In name, it was a nanny, but in reality, Qiao Mo meant that the nanny could take care of Yan Qiue and warm his bed. In the end, he didn't expect that the nanny had other thoughts. She climbed into Yan Qiue's bed in the middle of the night and saw something she shouldn't have seen. Yan Qiue immediately tore her into pieces. When Qiao Mo heard the news, he saw Yan Qiue leaning against the door. His collar was open and there were spots of wounds. As for the nanny, she had been reduced to pieces of flesh on the ground. Qiao Mo had never imagined that there would actually be someone who could tame this evildoer. Such a wanton and flamboyant person, in front of Xiao Qing, was as obedient as a kitten. Thus, Qiao Mo looked at Xiao Qing with a probing gaze. Yan Qiue immediately blocked Xiao Mo's gaze without leaving a trace. The corner of Qiao Mo's mouth twitched. She was jealous of this. "Why are you here? Hurry up and say what you want to say and get lost." Yan Qiue looked at Qiao Mo coldly. He dared to look at his wife so many times. Did he have any ulterior motives? "I'm actually here to apologize." Qiao Mo was silent for a moment before saying. His sister, Qiao Yu, was a little arrogant. Qiao Mo knew this very well. He wasn't the kind of person who would side with his family regardless of right or wrong. Moreover, Yan Qiue's value was extraordinary. He didn't want to fall out with Yan Qiue at all. Yan Qiue didn't say anything. Qiao Mo was slightly stunned. "I thought you would react." Yan Qiue said lazily, "Didn't you want to apologize?" "I'm waiting for you to apologize." Most people would be polite and let the matter pass, but not Yan Qiue. Xiao Imo knew his temper very well. He sighed and said, Xiao Yu has a bad temper. I've told her many times, but she won't change. This time, she offended your wife. I've already scolded her when I got back. How about we let this matter pass? Chapter 131. You know my temper. I don't care if she offends me. Even if it's for your sake, I won't care too much about it. But she actually dared to mess with my wife. Yan Qiue was still leaning lazily in Xiao Qing's arms. His long and narrow eyes were slightly narrowed, and a trace of coldness flashed through them. If it weren't for the fact that he still had to stay in Linchuan Survivor Base, he would have already torn Xiao Yu into pieces. Xiao Mo looked helpless. Aren't I here to apologize to you? What's the use of apologizing? Yan Qiue glared at him and said sarcastically, How about I kill your sister and apologize to you? Xiao Qing stroked Yan Qiue's head very gently. Then, Yan Qiue's cheeks turned red. He stuffed himself into Xiao Qing's arms and said shyly, She shouldn't have bullied my wife. This time, for your sake, I'll let bygones be bygones. But if there's a next time, I won't be lenient. Xiao Mo couldn't help but look at Xiao Qing again. He was now really impressed by Xiao Qing. How capable must she be to be able to subdue Yan Qiue? Just an apology is too shallow. I found something new, and I'm going to pick it up in 2 days. Madam, you're a wood paranormal, right? I wonder if you've subdued all the mutant plants. Xiao Qing shook her head. There's still one spot left. She had subdued a total of 3 mutant plants, and she could subdue 1 more. Whether it was the original vine, or the man-eating flower and daughter, they were all inclined towards attacking. Xiao Qing originally wanted to find a plant that could be used as an auxiliary, but she hadn't found a suitable one, so she didn't deliberately look for one. There's a type of mutated plant in the vicinity. The fragrance it emits can make people feel weak all over. The fruits it produces are similar to the pills Qiyu makes. What I mean is that when we leave in a few days, I'll bring you to subdue it. Consider it my apology. Xiao Mo said with a smile. Yan Qiue squeezed Xiao Qing's hand, signaling her to agree. When Xiao Qing agreed, Yan Qiue immediately said, I want to go too. No matter what, he couldn't allow Xiao Mo to interact with his wife. He hadn't managed to woo his wife yet. What if Xiao Mo had ulterior motives and laid his hands on his wife? Your body. Xiao Mo furrowed his brows. They had worked together for such a long time, and there was bound to be some camaraderie between them. Moreover, Yan Qiue was too important, and he didn't want anything to happen to her. I'll recuperate well. Yan Qiue didn't care in the past, but after meeting Xiao Qing, his thoughts completely changed. He wanted to live well and live a little longer so that he could spend more time with Xiao Qing. Moreover, how could he give his wife a sense of security with such a weak body? Therefore, Yan Qiue made up his mind to take care of his body. His wife definitely wouldn't like it if he was sick. Then it's decided. Xiao Mo smiled and said, I won't disturb you anymore. Before leaving, I'll send someone to inform you. Yan Qiue impatiently waved his hand and chased the helpless Xiao Mo away. After chasing Xiao Mo away, Yan Qiue took the ring off his finger and put it on Xiao Qing's finger. Wife, this ring was made by me. You just need to press the switch on the inside, and it can release an electric current to paralyze people. Take it for self-defense. You can wear it. Xiao Qing said and was about to take it off. She felt that she could protect herself, but Yan Qiue looked a little more fragile. Yan Qiue quickly took out another ring. I made a total of 2 rings. Wear it and don't take it off. Xiao Qing didn't argue anymore. She just helplessly looked at Yan Qiue and snickered. Yan Qiue was very happy. He used the hand with the ring on his finger to hold Xiaoqing's hand with the ring. Looking at the couple's rings on their fingers, he couldn't help but feel happy. He had lived in a dark corner all his life. He had never felt so warm and bright. Yan Qiue especially liked to see Xiaoqing's helpless look. He liked to see her give in for him even if she was helpless. There was a faint doting in her eyes. It was very shallow, but it filled Yan Qiue's heart perfectly. His heart, which hadn't throbbed for many years, was touched by her little by little. It was itchy and didn't hurt, but it was much more comfortable than every time he hurt himself. "Baby, I want to know your name." Yan Qiue looked at Xiaoqing with bright eyes. Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment and then said, "Xiaoqing." Xiao as in Fang Xiao, Qing as in amorous. Yan Qiue immediately acted like a love-struck fool and said, "Baby, your name is as good as you." "Well, it sounds good." Xiaoqing felt that he was probably hopeless. Xiaoqing also wanted to keep a distance from him. After all, she had to leave sooner or later. Dai, Little Bun, and Yan Hanqing were all waiting for her. It was not good for Yan Qiue to fall too deeply. However, every time Yan Qiue looked at her pitifully, she couldn't help being nice to him. It was probably because this was a world that looked at appearances. Yan Qiue was too good-looking. Even Xiaoqing, who didn't think that she was obsessed with appearances, couldn't help but be nicer to Yan Qiue. In the entire base, because of Yan Qiue's arrogance, there were many people who had opinions about him. However, there were still some people who couldn't help but want to look at him more, even if they knew that his temper and character were so bad. This was probably the advantage of being good-looking. "Can I call you Qing in the future?" Yan Qiue looked at Xiaoqing expectantly. He wanted to call her more intimately and ambiguously. If possible, he hoped that Xiaoqing could call him more intimately. Yan Yan, Chi Chi, Yu Yu, they were all good choices. However, with Xiaoqing's character, it seemed a little impossible. Xiaoqing's face stiffened. Since he was a patient, she tolerated it. Chapter 132. Probably to show his sincerity, Qiao Mo personally led a team to help Xiaoqing get the mutant plant. Although he didn't bring many people with him, they were all elites. He brought 3 peak level 3 paranormals, and the weakest of the other 5 was at the peak of level 2. Naturally, there were level 4 paranormals in the base, but the place they were going to this time wasn't that dangerous, so they didn't send any level 4 paranormals. Level 4 paranormals were all powerful enough to stand on their own. For a base, they were the top force, and wouldn't be used easily. It was very comfortable to travel with Qiao Mo. His car was a commercial RV, which was very spacious and had a bed. Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue occupied the bed. Yan Qiue seemed to like lying in Xiaoqing's arms. Even though Qiao Mo and a few other paranormals were beside them, Yan Qiue still occupied Xiaoqing's arms openly, without showing any shyness. Those level 3 paranormals all lowered their heads, not daring to look at Yan Qiue. They were afraid that they would be killed if they saw something they shouldn't. After all, Yan Qiue was famous for his unpredictable temper, and no one wanted to get into trouble with him. Xiaoqing held a crystal. While lying down, she absorbed the crystal's power to heal her body. The Zombie King's crystal contained too much energy. Although most of it was used to heal her body, some of it still went into the crystal nucleus in her head. At first, the impact was great, but gradually, it became lighter. Some of it still flowed into the crystal nucleus, slowly filling it, and some of it went into Xiaoqing's body, healing her internal organs and meridians. Although the healing process was getting slower and slower, she could now exert more than half of her previous strength. However, when she consumed too much of her power, her meridians and internal organs would hurt. Wife, the energy should be more useful than the zombie crystal, right? Yan Qiyu also knew that Xiaoqing was seriously injured, so he was very distressed. He thought for a moment and then said, "When we get home, I will check the stock. Although there are not many wood crystal nuclei, there are still a few. You can try to absorb them." Among the crowd, the level 3 wood paranormal couldn't help but shrink his head, making himself invisible. He was afraid that Yan Qiyu would take a fancy to his energy core. "I have an advanced crystal stone in my body, so I can't absorb zombie nuclei that are too high level, let alone alien nuclei. Otherwise, there will be an energy collision, which will aggravate my injury." Xiaoqing touched Yan Qiyue's head. She suddenly liked this action. Yan Qiyue's short hair was very soft. It was not as flamboyant as what others said about him. It felt exceptionally good to touch. Qiao Mo couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and ask, "Zombie crystals can be placed inside the body. Could it be that there's a new absorption method? Because my body is different from others. Ordinary people shouldn't try it." Xiaoqing shook her head, and then Yan Qiyu hugged her. Yan Qiyu looked at Qiao Mo with a dangerous look. His wife was honest, but Qiao Mo was an old fox. What if Qiao Mo found out something? Qiao Mo thought that Yan Qiyu was jealous. In the past, Yan Qiyue's character was very bad, and he lived recklessly. He was a completely different person from the vinegar jar now. He couldn't help but shake his head, but he also yearned to find a girl he liked. He could share everything with her. It was indeed a good thing to enjoy and be spoiled by someone. With several level 2 paranormals escorting them, Xiaoqing and the others didn't encounter any danger along the way. At noon, they stopped once. Xiaoqing remembered that Yan Qiyu had a bad stomach, so she didn't forget to bring him kitchen utensils and ingredients for making soup. She also picked some non-poisonous wild vegetables and mushrooms nearby and made a pot of chicken soup. Chapter 133. As she boiled the soup, she thought that she could make some fresh cushion carp next time. Cushion carp soup was the best for the stomach. Putting aside the taste of the soup, just the aroma alone was enough to make Qiao Mo and the others keep looking over. Yan Qiyu didn't want to share Xiaoqing's soup with them at all. She wished she could throw this group of people who were eyeing her covetously. Qiao Mo moved over and stared at the pot of soup. "Look at this big pot of soup. You can't finish it alone. Why don't I help you?" Yan Qiyu sneered. "Who says I can't finish it?" Then, in front of everyone, he drank the pot of soup that was still hot. He drank it very quickly, afraid that someone would snatch it from him. Finally, he wiped his mouth. "I'm done." Qiao Mo glanced at Yan Qiyue's protruding belly and silently gave him a thumbs up. He was really too hardworking. Yan Qiyu sneered. He would never let Xiaoqing's soup go into someone else's stomach. Absolutely not. You're done." Xiaoqing turned around and saw Yan Qiyue's protruding belly sitting there. She could not help but reach out and touch Yan Qiyue's belly. It was soft and nice to the touch. "Can you still eat?" Yan Qiyu glanced at the shredded pork with green pepper in Xiaoqing's hand and gritted his teeth. "Yes." Xiaoqing could not help but say, "If you can't eat, then don't force yourself. There are so many people here anyway. Your stomach is not good, so don't torture it." Yan Qiyu gritted his teeth. "Who said that? I'm not full yet." Then, he burped. Yan Qiyu was a little embarrassed. He could not help but cover his mouth and say, "I just drank a little too much soup. Actually, soup is not full. Wait for me. I'll eat it when I come back." Before Yan Qiue left, he glared fiercely at Xiao Imo, especially protective of his food. Xiao Imo touched the bridge of his nose helplessly. He had known Yan Qiue for a long time, but he had never seen such a childish side of him. Yan Qiue went to pee, and then came back valiantly to fight again. In the end, she ate all the food made by Xiaoqing and lay in Xiaoqing's arms, crying. Xiaoqing had no choice but to rub his tummy. She sighed and said, "Do you know pain now?" Yan Qiue's eyes were red, but she was still stubborn. "It doesn't hurt." Xiaoqing had no choice but to rub his stomach with a sigh. The other paranormals who were watching them were stunned. Was this Yan Qiue? They must not have woken up yet. Or maybe Yan Qiue was possessed by something. This scene was simply unscientific. When it was time for dinner and breakfast, Xiaoqing didn't dare to cook too much. She only cooked a little according to Yan Qiue's perverted appetite. She ate very little herself. Anyway, she would vomit it out anyway. When they arrived at the place, several paranormals automatically formed a formation, surrounding Xiaoqing and the other two in the middle. They cooperated very well and walked forward. They were in a jungle. The thing Xiao Imo was looking for was related to Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue was developing a potion that could temporarily replace crystal stones and quickly restore people's superpowers. It was just like the small blue potion bottle in the online game. The missing material could be found in the potion. There were naturally no zombies in the jungle, but there were a large number of mutant plants and animals. It was even more dangerous than the zombie-filled city. After all, mutant plants and animals were more lethal than zombies, especially mutant animals. They were often very flexible, and their strength and speed were much stronger than ordinary zombies. With the help of mutant plants, the jungle was also very dangerous. Chapter 134. As soon as they entered the forest, they encountered two mutant animals. One of them looked like a wild dog and was very fast, while the other looked like a wild boar and had very strong defense and strength. Fortunately, Xiao Mo's team often cooperated with each other, so it didn't take them much effort to deal with the two mutant animals. However, they still encountered some trouble along the way. There was a kind of tree. Although they didn't know what its original species was, after mutation, its vines would bind people and drag them to the trunk. The branches and leaves of the tree would secrete a kind of drowsy fragrance. When people fell asleep and lost the ability to struggle, they would be dragged all the way to the tree. The tree had sharp thorns. After piercing into a person's body, it would be like the venom secreted by Xiaoqing's vines, corroding the insides of the person's body until only the body was left, and then slowly absorbed. There were also a lot of small mutant animals living near the tree. They would help the tree attract and kill humans and large animals, and then part of their limbs would be used to fill their stomachs. It was a mutually beneficial relationship. Xiaoqing and the others had almost been tricked by this kind of tree. Fortunately, Xiaoqing, as a wood ability user, had discovered that something was wrong in time. She hadn't been able to absorb the tree's fragrance and had been caught in one fell swoop. They also wiped out the mutant animals near the tree. Mutant animals had nuclei similar to zombies in their brains, so did mutant plants, but they didn't know where they were. In addition to harvesting a lot of nuclei, Yan Qiue also extracted some toxins and sap from the tree. He probably wanted to go back and do some research. Sure enough, there's everything in the forest. A paranormal breathed a sigh of relief, then said, "I've really learned something today. Thanks to sister-in-law's alertness, otherwise we wouldn't have found it." Xiao Imo expressed his goodwill to Xiaoqing, and then Yan Qiue was flattered by the word sister-in-law. He didn't care that Xiao Imo called himself brother and took advantage of him. Xiao Imo noticed this. Whenever it was related to Xiaoqing, Xiao Imo would definitely lose his mind, and become a completely different person from the usual Yan Qiue. More importantly, as long as Qiao Imo praised Yan Qiue and Xiao Qing's relationship, he could definitely appease Yan Qiue. He had obtained a very useful new skill. There is indeed everything in the jungle. What kind of weather is this? There are so many mosquitoes. Another paranormal said as he waved his hand to drive away the mosquitoes that were a size larger than normal mosquitoes. He couldn't help but feel envious. Those mosquitoes didn't bite Xiao Qing at all. Moreover, they stayed far away from them. As for the few of them, they were especially attractive to mosquitoes. The mosquitoes were all circling around them. Could it be that even mosquitoes looked at faces now? Or could it be that mosquitoes didn't look at faces, but gender? There's something wrong. Yan Qiue couldn't help but frown. He stretched out his hand and clenched his fist in the air. A mosquito closest to him suddenly froze in mid-air, allowing everyone to see what the mosquito looked like. This mosquito was a lot bigger than ordinary mosquitoes. Its mouth was sharp and long, looking like a thick and long steel needle. It was already more than half the length of the mosquito's body. There were also spots on its wings, looking particularly strange. Has anyone been bitten? Yan Qiue asked calmly. Immediately, someone raised his hand. I was bitten. It's on the back of my hand. As soon as he stretched out his hand, he was stunned. There was a big red and swollen bump on his hand, and pus kept flowing out. The key was that he didn't notice it at all. Such a big bump, under normal circumstances, he would definitely have noticed it. He wouldn't have only noticed it when his flesh was rotten. Chapter 135. More importantly, he had just been bitten. How did the back of his hand become like this? The man was very panicked, and the others also hurriedly looked at the places where they had been bitten. As they expected, when they weren't paying attention, the places where they had been bitten all had big blisters. The blisters looked terrible, but they didn't feel it at all. If Yan Qiue hadn't asked, they wouldn't have even found out that the places where they had been bitten had become like this. The other two paranormals who hadn't been bitten hurriedly used their powers to clean up the mosquitoes that were still circling around and refused to leave. One of them was a fire paranormal. As soon as they took action, the mosquitoes flew away very cleverly. As for the rest, they were busy studying the bites. The places where they had been bitten all looked like they had been infected. Pus and blood kept flowing out, and big blisters were bulging. Some places had even begun to rot. One of the paranormals took out a dagger and directly cut off the bulging blisters. However, wherever the pus and blood touched, it began to rot. He had to cut off the rotten flesh with pus and blood. In the end, the blister was only the size of a chestnut, but a large piece of flesh was cut off. Seeing that it was so effective, the other paranormals began to follow suit. Some of them had wounds on their necks and backs, so they had to ask others to help them. In the end, all of them were injured. These mosquitoes seem to be afraid of fire. If they get any closer, the fire paranormals will expel them. There are dangers everywhere in the jungle. Don't take it lightly. Qiao Mo's tone was also a little low. They had fought against large mutant animals, but in the end, they had been defeated by mutant mosquitoes. They had learned from their mistakes. They didn't dare to underestimate all the animals and plants in the jungle anymore. God knew if a blade of grass near their feet had the ability to kill people. What if it did? Even mosquitoes could make them suffer such a big loss. How could they not be careful? Yan Qiue silently put the mosquito he controlled into the bottle and prepared to take it back for research. Xiao Qing couldn't help but look at the bottle. Although she knew it was safe, she still had the urge to pinch the mosquito inside. Yan Qiue misunderstood. He thought that Xiao Qing was curious about his strength, so he quickly said, "My ability is different. I can control the air. I can compress the air and form an air bomb. I can also draw a vacuum in an instant, but it consumes a lot of my ability. Xiaoqing nodded. This ability was indeed very useful. Whether it was during normal times or during a fight, especially during normal times, it should be particularly effective to preserve some food. If those vegetables and fruits were stored in a vacuum, they should be able to be stored for a long time, right? Yan Qiyu had no idea that Xiaoqing had already begun to think about the daily use of his supernatural ability, such as preserving food. Even if she knew, Yan Qiyu would only be very happy. After all, in his wife's heart, he was still quite useful. Thinking about it made him very happy. We'll be close to our destination if we go further. Everyone, be careful. We're now deep in the jungle. The deeper we go, the more dangerous it will be. Just like before, a small mosquito could cause so much harm, let alone other animals. Everyone, don't let your guard down, Xiao Mo said very calmly. Everyone nodded. After walking for a while with heightened vigilance, they came out of the grass that was half a person's height and saw a sea of flowers. Clumps of unknown big red flowers bloomed particularly enchantingly. This sea of flowers should have grown naturally. It looked very irregular, but because it grew very densely, only clumps and clusters of flowers could be seen. The heavy flowers pressed down on the stems and squeezed together, and then emitted a sweet and greasy fragrance. This made the ability users who had been tricked countless times before become vigilant and hold their breaths. In their hearts, anything with a fragrance was equivalent to poison. One of the ability users even directly said to Xiao Mo, "Why don't we take a detour?" They were really afraid of being tricked. If there was poison, such a large sea of flowers might hide some strange things in it. How could they walk out of it? Yeah, let's take a detour. It's better to be vigilant than to be tricked, the other ability users echoed. Wait a moment. I'll collect some of their pollen and go back to study it. Looking at the sea of flowers, Yan Qiyue's eyes lit up. He couldn't help but take a step forward. Then, he was stopped by Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing stretched out her finger and released an emerald green vine without any thorns. It looked fresh and cute. The vine wriggled out and came into contact with a large, bright red flower. The emerald green vine was immediately dyed pink. Soon, half of the vine was red. When Xiaoqing took the vine back, she asked Yan Qiyue to find a bottle. She put the vine in the bottle, and the vine immediately spat out a lot of red juice. The juice was absorbed by the vine and came from the stamen of the big flower. If there was poison, this should be the most poisonous part. It was just right for Yan Qiyue to study. My wife really loves me. My wife really loves me. My heart is warm. These words kept flooding Yan Qiyue's mind. Then, he looked up shyly and saw Xiaoqing's pale face with a touch of faint red. Was his wife shy as well? He had never seen his wife shy before. It's not poison. Xiaoqing couldn't help but press her temples. Those vines were formed by her energy. When she took them back, a little juice accidentally returned to her body with the energy. Now, she felt a little hot. Chapter 136. Yan Qiyue's eyes lit up like light bulbs. He leaned forward shyly and said, "Is it that kind of heat?" "Qing, don't be afraid. I'm here. We can solve it behind the bushes." "What are you thinking about?" Xiaoqing glanced at Yan Qiyue, then closed her eyes and savored it carefully. It has an exciting effect, and also a little stimulating effect. The circulation of power and blood flow are much faster. It's a good thing, but I don't know if there are any side effects. Yan Qiyue was very disappointed. He thought that he could eat meat today, after the disappointment, he cheered up and asked Xiao Mo, "Can we collect more and take it back?" Naturally, Xiao Mo heard Xiao Qing's words. The side effects of stimulating one's lust were nothing. If he could create something even more effective than the invincible little pill, that would be his greatest gain this time. He waved his hand, and immediately several superpowered people came forward with bottles and cans to collect the liquid in the flowers. Xiao Qing told them to put on transparent gloves to prevent them from touching the liquid. After all, Xiao Qing was a zombie. For her, it was only a little stimulating, but for these superpowered people, a few paranormals had just walked to the flowering shrubs and were about to collect the liquid when Xiao Qing suddenly heard a faint rustling sound. Before she could warn them, she saw a greenish-black shadow soar into the sky with falling petals. When it came back down, they could see a bloody mouth. It was a giant python as thick as a bucket. It swallowed an unsuspecting superpowered person in one bite. Xiao Qing and the others even saw a human figure slide down its body and finally become a bulge in its abdomen. Soon, the bulge would be digested. After all, the digestive ability of mutant animals was a lot stronger. The other superpowered people were shocked. After they reacted, they used their own abilities, probably wanting to kill the python and save the unlucky one in its belly. However, the python's scales were unexpectedly strong. Whether it was fireballs or earth thorns, they didn't even leave a white mark on the python's body. The python was very smart. It knew how to hit the target with one strike and escape thousands of miles away. It didn't want to stay at all. Xiao Qing glanced at Xiao Mo. He had no intention of making a move, so he decided to help the metahumans instead. Vines soared into the sky, twisting many of the blooming flowers into pieces before tying up the python. Pythons were slippery, so ordinary vines would definitely not be able to bind them. However, Xiao Qing's vines were equipped with particularly sharp thorns. The moment the thorns were bound by the vines, they fiercely pierced into the python's flesh. The superpowered people attacked the python for a long time, but couldn't even leave a white mark on its tough skin. The thorns easily pierced into the python's body. The python, which had wanted to escape, suddenly stopped. The superpowered people were very surprised and immediately rushed up. The earth-powered superpowered person was very smart. The sharp earth thorns couldn't pierce the python's skin, but they could blind the python's eyes. When the thorns pierced the python's eyes, it roared in pain and shook its head and tail. However, no matter what it did, it couldn't break free from the vines that had wrapped it up like a fried dough twist. The strength-type paranormal pressed down on the head of the python, and all kinds of special abilities fell down from the sky, drowning the big python directly. The fatal one was a thorn that pierced through the eye socket and into the brain. After the python died, they hurriedly cut open its stomach. Unfortunately, the superpowered person inside was already dead. His hands, feet, and face were corroded by stomach acid, and white bones were exposed. Chapter 137. When they looked at the large field of bright red flowers again, it was as if they were looking at a blooming jimsonweed by the river of forgetfulness. The flowers were particularly beautiful, but there were countless dangers hidden in them. When they collected the juice in the flowers again, they were very careful. Even so, 2 of the paranormals were slightly injured. Moreover, they only dared to collect some at the edge and did not dare to go deep into the flower field. They only collected 3 bottles. Yan Qiyu looked at such a large field of flowers and then looked at the small bottles with some reluctance. He could not move his feet. They were all excellent experimental materials. He was full of reluctance to give them up. However, he also knew that if he went deep into the flower field, it was very likely that those paranormals would not be able to come back. Just as Yan Qiyu was looking at the flower field with reluctance, Xiao Qing suddenly walked over. Yan Qiue's face changed immediately. He grabbed Xiao Qing and asked, "Qing, what are you doing?" Xiao Qing looked at him in confusion. Wasn't it Yan Qiue who showed reluctance just now? She just looked at his pitiful appearance and her heart softened. "I don't want them. Those are enough." Yan Qiue's heart softened under Xiao Qing's gaze. He said softly, "Let's go." No matter how precious those experimental materials were, how could they be compared to Xiao Qing? "I'll be fine." Xiao Qing patted Yan Qiue's shoulder and curled her lips slightly. She usually had a cold expression and rarely smiled. Now, with just a slight smile, Yan Qiue's heart thumped wildly. He watched Xiao Qing walk into the flower field. When she walked in, Xiao Qing raised her hand and countless vines rushed into the sky, opening a path in the flower field. At this time, everyone found that under those beautiful flowers were piles of bones. Some of them were left behind by animals, and some were left behind by humans. It was because of these bones that the flowers on top could bloom so beautifully. Xiao Qing stepped on the white bones and commanded the vines to collect the juice from the flowers into a bottle like a straw. Occasionally, there would be mutated animals that tried to sneak up on her, but they would be whipped away by her vines. Xiao Mo narrowed his eyes and typed the word danger behind Xiao Qing's name. Her strength wasn't low, and her personality was unclear. However, how could someone who could tame Yan Qiue be a simple person? With that thought in mind, Xiao Mo couldn't help but glance at Yan Qiue. Then, he saw a look of desire and dissatisfaction on Yan Qiue's face. Xiao Mo covered his eyes. He was going blind. Xiao Qing quickly collected a large pile of flower nectar, and then threw it all to the little brothers to carry. Before entering the forest, they found a hidden place to park the RV. After all, it was simply wishful thinking to drive a car in the forest, let alone an RV. One of the people who had a good relationship with the psychic who died at the beginning was a little angry. He looked young, and he widened his eyes and asked Xiao Qing, "You clearly have the strength to get the liquid. If you took action, there wouldn't be any death. Why didn't you take action at the beginning?" Xiao Qing was very tolerant of this kind of naive young man. She curled the corner of her lips and said, "Why do I have to do it if I have the strength? According to you, if I have the strength, I should go around saving people? Be a shining Virgin Mary?" "No. I didn't mean that." The young man was a little anxious and stammered, You were right in front of me, you were my partner. Aw. I don't want to move." Xiao Qing's expression instantly turned cold. She didn't have any obligation to do anything. Just like just now, when she collected the liquid for Yan Qiue, she didn't need to do anything. She just wanted to do it. Chapter 138. You. The young man's eyes were a little red, but he wasn't angry. Instead, he felt a little wronged. If Xiao Qing had been the first to make a move, then his friend wouldn't have died. Xiao Qing said kindly, "I have the strength, so I have to do everything. Is it fair for me to take the risk?" The young man tried to refute, but in the end, he realized that if he had the strength of Xiao Qing and was willing to do this, then that would be his personal choice. If Xiao Qing wasn't willing, then that would be Xiao Qing's choice. He had crossed the line. Yan Qiue walked over and naturally leaned on Xiao Qing. He smiled at the young man and said, "Since my baby is willing to tell you more, then I'll tell you a little too. Do you see Xiao Mo standing over there? If he had chosen to make a move first, then there wouldn't have been any casualties. Why don't you blame him? Because he was the leader of the base." This sentence lingered on the young man's lips for a moment, but he didn't say it out loud. He was a little ashamed. Because of their different statuses, he had blamed Xiao Qing and not Xiao Mo. Wasn't this also unfair to Xiao Qing? The young man, whose worldview had been turned upside down, was very sad. Yan Chiyu smiled sweetly and patted the young man's shoulder. Is this also called looking at people through colored glasses? The young man was even more ashamed. Yan Chiyu pulled Xiaoqing back with satisfaction. Xiaoqing said indifferently, is it really okay to mislead him like this? Yan Chiyu had an innocent look on his face. Then, he thought sweetly that his wife was still too kind. Based on his personality in the past, if he met someone who dared to criticize his wife, he would definitely sew up that person's mouth or cut off that person's tongue so that he would never be able to say such things again. Qiao Mo, who was unjustly implicated, was speechless. After burying the body, the group continued forward. Qiao Mo even specially gave the crystal core of the python to Xiaoqing. It was a dark green crystal with a deep luster. It looked very beautiful. Xiaoqing graciously accepted the gift and threw it into her space. After all, she was the one who had trapped her in the first place, so why wouldn't she take advantage of it? Yan Chiyu snuggled up to Xiaoqing. The area where he touched Xiaoqing was getting hotter and hotter. Xiaoqing couldn't help but glance at Yan Chiyu. His face was red and his aroused eyes were flirtatious. But that was not the point. The point was, why was he in heat again? Xiaoqing couldn't help but ask. Yan Chiyu replied, when I saw you in the flower field surrounded by green vines, I couldn't help but think of that day. Then, he reacted. There was a reaction. Xiaoqing was silent for a long time, not knowing how to answer. Nighttime in the forest was the most dangerous time. Every time it was almost nighttime, they had to find a suitable place to set up camp. Then, they would clear the surroundings that might be dangerous and set up the tent. During the process, Xiaoqing and Yan Chiyu were in charge of showing off their affection. Although Xiaoqing didn't think so, after dinner, it was time to rest. Xiaoqing didn't know why, but she found it especially hard to fall asleep tonight. She turned over and Yan Chiyu naturally hugged her from behind. Her body was clearly cold, but at this moment, she felt that the area where the two of them touched had become hot. Could it be the side effect of that juice during the day? Or was it the feeling of the crystal she swallowed repairing her body? Although her body would heat up in the past, it wasn't this serious. Xiaoqing tossed and turned but couldn't fall asleep. She got up and prepared to go out for a walk. She quietly got up and left the tent without waking Yan Chiyu up. Chapter 139. Qiao Mo felt that Yan Chiyu was acting strange today. Normally, he would stick close to Xiaoqing, but today, he didn't. It didn't seem like he didn't like Xiaoqing. He was acting like a little wife, sneaking glances at Xiaoqing, and even acting shy. Whenever someone approached Xiaoqing, he would stare at that person. He wouldn't stop until that person's hair stood on end and he left. What was even scarier was that he was wearing a white shirt today. The top two buttons were unbuttoned, exposing the bite marks on his neck and the kiss marks on his collarbone. Qiao Mo was horrified. Could it be that the two of them had sex last night? And it was Yan Chiyu's first time. Otherwise, why would Yan Chiyu act like a newly married wife? Qiao Mo didn't think too much about it because they had arrived at their destination. The plants that Qiao Mo had described grew in this area. They looked like miniature versions of orange trees, with round leaves that emitted a fragrance that would make anyone who smelled it feel weak all over. Between the branches and leaves hung bright red fruits that looked like begonias or hawthorns. However, their skin was smooth and glossy, making them look very pleasing to the eye. In the center, there was a tree that was taller than the others, and its fruits were bigger than the others. Under the tree were pink lanterns. If one looked carefully, one would find that they weren't lanterns, but a kind of plant, which was emitting a faint light. The little lanterns were very cute. They twinkled and looked like they were floating in the air. In fact, they were supported by a thin stem, which was slightly bent under the weight of the lanterns. In short, the whole plant was emitting a cute aura. "That's our target." Xiao and Mo pointed at the little lantern and said, "After we collect it, we'll help sister-in-law tame that mutated autumn apple. What do you think?" Xiao Qing nodded. She vaguely felt a trace of danger. She couldn't help but say, "Be careful, everyone. I think something is wrong. Let me try first." An Earth-powered paranormal, who was holding an Earth shield, slowly approached the autumn blossoms. There was no movement in the quiet autumn blossoms. Only when he got closer did he hear a faint rustling sound, which sounded like the wind blowing through the leaves. Amidst the harmony, Xiao Qing heard the faint sound of insects flapping their wings. She looked up and saw a black hornet that was larger than a normal bee circling above the autumn flowers. If he saw a wasp in other places, it would be nothing, but this was a jungle where mutant animals ran rampant. Not to mention a wasp, even a mosquito was so aggressive. "Watch your head," Xiao Qing reminded him. The man looked up and saw that it was only a wasp. He was relieved. Then, countless wasps flew out from the surrounding trees. The dense swarm of wasps looked particularly frightening. The Earth ability user was startled. He rolled over and covered himself with an Earth shield. Another fire ability user hurriedly threw out fireballs. Bees were afraid of fire, but he didn't know whether these mutated wasps were afraid of fire or not. Then, it turned out that they were afraid of fire too. It was probably the nature of bees. Fire could scare them, but it wasn't as deadly as ordinary bees. These wasps could dodge the fireballs, but they were unharmed when they were touched. Seeing this, the fire ability user hurriedly covered the Earth ability user with a fire shield. Then, he covered Xiao Mo and the others, including Xiao Qing. With the fire shield, the wasps wouldn't easily get close. Xiao Mo couldn't help but frown. Get rid of these wasps. If they didn't get rid of them, they wouldn't be able to get close to the lanterns. Chapter 140. The remaining few metahumans immediately stepped forward and used their special skills to deal with these wasps. For a moment, their abilities filled the sky, but they were unable to eliminate many wasps. Because the wasps were too small, they could only attack a large area or rely on luck. Moreover, the wasps were very agile. Most of the wasps had already dodged the attack. Xiao Mo also frowned. These wasps were difficult to deal with, but they had to be dealt with. He couldn't help but ask, "Chiyue, can you temporarily freeze this space?" Yan Chiyue nodded. "Yes." "Everyone, stop for a moment. Wait for Yan Chiyue to make a move. Then, immediately focus fire and destroy a large area." Xiao Mo waved his hand and said coldly. When they were ready, Yan Chiyue froze the air, and the hornets immediately froze in the air. The paranormals who were ready instantly focused their fire and cleared out a large number of hornets. The metahumans couldn't help but cheer. Xiao Qing saw that Yan Chiyue's face was somewhat pale. Controlling such a large area of wasps all at once must be a heavy burden for him. However, there were still many wasps. According to the proportion of wasps that had just been killed, Yan Chiyue would have to attack at least 5 more times. Xiao Qing couldn't help but say, "I have another way. Let me try it first." Xiao Mo naturally gave Xiao Qing face. He ordered the metahumans to temporarily stop and see what Xiao Qing would do. Xiao Qing released her big flower. The man-eating flower hadn't been released to eat for a long time. When Xiao Qing released it, it burped and spat out a few pieces of bone. It looked very much like picking its teeth. The metahumans couldn't help but look at the flower that was constantly opening and closing. The wriggling petals and the mysterious stamen looked very ferocious. As soon as the man-eating flower came out, it began to secrete a sweet and slightly irritating smell. The wasps seemed to have smelled something delicious and began to drill into the flower's mouth. All the wasps that entered the mouth of the man-eating flower would be digested into nutrients for the man-eating flower to absorb in the next second. Therefore, everyone could only see the hornets endlessly entering the man-eating flower's mouth. The number of hornets was clearly enough to fill the man-eating flower's head, but it still didn't look like the man-eating flower was full. Only when all the hornets in the sky had been wiped out did it shake its head and spit out a few broken wings in satisfaction. Several paranormals couldn't help but swallow their saliva and move away from the man-eating flower. Xiaoqing touched the big flower's head and was very satisfied. Xiaoqing was no longer of much use to her, especially after she had reached level 4. She didn't need the piranha flower anymore. Xiaoqing had even considered replacing it, but in the end, she still couldn't bear to do so. After all, he had accompanied her all the way and helped her a lot. Yan Qiue, on the other hand, liked Big Flower very much. She even tried to touch Big Flower's head, but Big Flower almost bit her hand off. Facing such a ferocious flower, Yan Qiue liked it even more. Does it have a name? It's called Big Flower. Xiaoqing knocked on Big Flower's head and told it to be more obedient. When Yan Qiue touched it again, Big Flower was as soft as the usual Yan Qiue when she met Xiaoqing. It's very cute. Yan Qiue sighed sincerely, and then the onlookers also sighed. Sure enough, if you weren't a family, you wouldn't enter the same family. When such ferocious two were together, they were indeed a match made in heaven. They didn't need to ask how Xiaoqing tamed Yan Qiue, because Xiaoqing herself wasn't an ordinary person. Chapter 141. We don't know what kind of danger there will be. Let's let the flower explore the way. Xiaoqing touched the big flower, and the big flower moved. It looked very clumsy, but in fact, it moved very quickly into the autumn flowers. The autumn blossoms were just like the flower field from before. Beneath them were piles of white bones. When the big flower was burrowing inside, it even secretly ate 2 autumn blossoms. In the end, it came back dizzy as if it was drunk. Useless. Xiaoqing sighed and put the flower away. Then she said, I haven't found any other danger yet. Shall we go? Everyone took out the gas masks they had prepared and put them on. They got into the autumn flowers and arrived at the small lanterns safely. The paranormals took out knives and began to cut the small lanterns. The stems of the small lanterns looked very thin, but they were very tough. The knives couldn't cut them. There were also thin vines that looked like whiskers curling up from the ground and stabbing at the paranormals. Those who were stung twitched and fell to the ground. They weren't poisoned to death, but they were paralyzed. If they were paralyzed before the hornets were cleared, they might be stung to death by the hornets that blotted out the sky. But there was no danger now. With this lesson, the others were prepared and didn't get stung again. They easily collected a lot of small lanterns. Xiaoqing also had time to carefully observe the small lanterns. The small lanterns looked pink, and the outer shell was white. The thin layer of skin was filled with liquid, and it was this liquid that was shining. The pink light looked very beautiful, but anyone who approached would feel chills down their spines when they saw the roots of the lantern flower in the white bone layer and the pink light. After retrieving the lantern flowers, Qiao Mo and the others accompanied Xiaoqing to tame the largest autumn tree. This was also the first time Qiao Mo used his ability. Qiao Mo's ability was a very ordinary water type, and the ability he used was also very ordinary. It was to form a layer of water that separated the largest autumn tree from the rest. There were also specks of blue light that flew out from the autumn tree and fell into the water layer. However, Xiao Mo's control over such a simple skill had reached perfection. When he made his move, Xiaoqing didn't even feel any energy fluctuations from his body. This was very rare. At least, Xiaoqing hadn't reached this level yet. The split autumn tree still wanted to struggle, but Xiaoqing stretched out her hand, and a surge of wood elemental energy gushed out from her hands, completely wrapping around the autumn tree. After wrapping it up, one could see the autumn tree's dark green leaves, its darker colored stem, and its red fruits. They all turned emerald green, as if they had been devoured and assimilated. Finally, they shattered with a pop, and flowed back into Xiaoqing's body along with the energy. This was the most overbearing way of subduing a plant. Ordinary wood ability users wouldn't use this method, because if they couldn't completely subdue the mutant plant, they would be devoured by it and might even lose their lives. To use this method of taming, not only did it require a lot of strength, it also required a lot of courage. Those who were timid wouldn't dare to try it. Xiaoqing moved her muscles and bones, feeling that her injuries were a little better. She took a deep breath and said to Xiao Mo, "Thank you." This time, Xiao Mo's smile was a lot more sincere. "This is my apology. There's no need to thank me." In the past, he valued Xiaoqing because of Yan Qiue. Now, he valued Xiaoqing's value. Chapter 142. Xiao Mo's intuition told him that Xiaoqing was definitely not lower than level 4. A level 4 wood ability user's value was needless to say. Now that Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue were a couple, it meant that Xiaoqing was already a member of their base. Well, it seemed that he had to treat Xiaoqing better. What if Yan Qiue couldn't keep Xiaoqing tied to him? We've got what we need. Collect some autumn tangs and let's go. After Xiao Mo finished speaking, the ability users quickly collected a bag of autumn tangs and prepared to retreat. Although they had lost one person in this operation, they had also gained a lot. Overall, they had gained more than they had lost. Naturally, there were more good things in the jungle, but all of them understood that endless greed would only lead to death, so they obediently followed Xiao Mo back the way they had come. However, before they left the territory, Xiaoqing heard some strange noises. She couldn't help but jump up a tree and look into the distance. What she saw gave her a fright. In front of her, there was a dense mass of marching ants that she couldn't see the end of. These ants had another name. They were called man-eating ants. There were many of them, and when they came out to hunt, they often came in a nest of ants, like a marching army. Moreover, these ants were especially scary. Wherever they went, not even a blade of grass grew. Whether it was animals or plants, they would be eaten in an instant. Even an elephant would not be able to last more than a few seconds before it was gnawed into a skeleton. Even with Xiaoqing's temperament, she couldn't help but change her expression. She quickly jumped down the tree, picked up Yan Qiue, and said, "Split up, marching ants." This time, Xiaoqing didn't need to explain. The group quickly divided into two groups. One group followed Xiaoqing, which was smaller in number, and ran east. The other group followed Xiao Mo, which was larger in number, and ran west. Although the marching ants would chase living things in their field of vision, they would only chase one side. This way, the other side would definitely survive, and it would depend on who was luckier. Clearly, Xiaoqing and Yan Qiue's luck wasn't very good. When Xiaoqing ran with Yan Qiue in her arms, she turned around and saw the army of ants behind them. It was a black mass that gave her goosebumps. In the jungle, the most frightening thing wasn't huge beasts, but marching ants. If they encountered huge beasts, they might be able to escape, but if they encountered marching ants, even if they had 9 lives, they probably wouldn't be able to squander it. The marching ants were very fast, almost at the same speed as Xiaoqing. The people behind her were not as fast as Xiaoqing and were constantly being chased. The two people were so scared that they kept throwing back fireballs and metal thorns. They tried to stop them. However, it was useless. They didn't even achieve their goal of slowing down the marching ants. Soon, a paranormal was caught. The ants had already climbed up his calf from his foot. Soon, they would probably cover his whole body. In panic, he grabbed his companion, and then the ants crawling all over his body followed his hand and climbed to his companion's body. The paranormal screamed and burned the ants on his body with his power. Of course, what he wanted to do more was to shake off the hand that was grabbing him. However, the paranormal caught in the swarm of ants held on to him tightly and wouldn't let go. When Xiaoqing looked back, she only saw that the two of them were quickly covered by ants. After the swarm of ants passed, a pile of flesh-colored bones fell to the ground. Marching ants were so scary. Xiaoqing didn't have time to sigh. She held Yan Qiue in her arms and stopped running. Instead, she shot out vines and swung from tree to tree like Spider-Man. It was faster this way, and she gradually got rid of the marching ants. The marching ants were very fast, but when they passed by, they had to eat the nearby plants and animals, so their speed was naturally slower. Xiaoqing ran desperately again. Although she was still holding Yan Qiue in her arms, she was still faster than the marching ants. "Qing, there is a river in front," Yan Qiue said with some surprise. He was very self-aware that he couldn't run fast. If he insisted on being brave, he would probably lose Xiaoqing, who came back to save him. Therefore, he stayed in Xiaoqing's arms very obediently. While they were running, Yan Qiue saw a small river in front of them. It was about less than 2 meters wide. The water was clear. Ants should be afraid of water, right? Before Yan Qiue could figure it out, Xiaoqing had already thrown out a vine and firmly wrapped it around a big tree on the other side of the river. Then they swung over. When they swung over, a crocodile jumped up in the middle of the river and tried to bite them. Then Yan Qiue kicked it back into the river, and it turned over dizzily. They landed on the other side of the river. Even with Xiaoqing's physical strength, she couldn't help but gasp slightly. They looked back and were shocked. Those ants had gone into the river. At first, some ants floated in the river and drowned in the end. Later, those ants learned to be smart. They huddled together and rolled into the river. When they passed by the crocodile, they also ate the crocodile that had just turned over. Yan Qiue's eyes widened. Before he could say a word, Xiaoqing carried him and ran away again. He only had time to take a look before he saw a huge black mass of ants rolling ashore and then quickly spreading out. Some ants at the outermost edge drowned, but 99% of the ants successfully crossed the river. 99% of the ants were heading in their direction again. Along the way, no matter if it was a big tree or grass, a rabbit or a wild wolf, they were all eaten up. Yan Qiue's heart was thumping. After a while, he suddenly said, "We can actually turn around." Xiaoqing was also stunned for a moment. Then she quickly turned around and hung herself and the person in her arms on a big tree from afar. Then, the two of them watched as the mighty army of ants ran straight ahead. Not many of them turned around to look for them. Xiaoqing, Yan Qiue, so why were they running for their lives? Chapter 143. When people were in danger, they would probably be confused. They actually forgot to change direction after leaving a safe distance. Leaning against the tree, Xiaoqing kept gasping for breath. As soon as they were safe, she found that even Yan Qiue was covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. She reached out to wipe his forehead. While wiping, her hand froze. "How do we get out?" Anyway, she didn't know the way. Even if she wasn't a directionally challenged person, in this jungle, she would become a directionally challenged person. She could indeed find a way out. After all, no matter where they went, they would get out of the jungle sooner or later. However, it was not certain where they would end up after getting out. Yan Qiue bit his nails. After a while, he said, I remember that many years ago, I read in a textbook that if you cut down a tree, you can tell north from south by looking at the growth rings. The book also said that you can tell by looking at the sparseness of the leaves. Xiao Qing looked up expressionlessly. Above her head were dense leaves. She could barely see the sun, not to mention the north, south, east, and west. Then Yan Qiue looked around and finally said, let's go in the opposite direction of the army ants. No matter what, they had to avoid the group of crazy ants first. Xiao Qing also nodded. The two of them went in the opposite direction of the army ants. Although they were alone, they were not worried. Xiao Qing and Yan Qiue's strength was not low. In terms of safety, as long as they didn't encounter a group of ants like the army ants, there would be no big danger. Xiao Qing's space was not short of food. There were even pots and pans and seasonings. Therefore, even if the two of them walked slowly, they could live a comfortable life. The two of them tried their best to walk along the river. There was a water source and fish in the water. Their life was not bad, but Yan Qiue was a little unhappy. That night was the first time in his 20-odd years of life that he had had sex. It was fine if he didn't have sex, but once he did, he couldn't control himself. Especially when the person he liked was by his side and there was no one in the way, Yan Qiue was a little restless. But Xiao Qing refused to have sex with him. At most, when she couldn't take it anymore, she would press him to the ground and give him a good whipping. But when it came to the real thing, there was nothing else. How could Yan Qiue tolerate this? He felt wronged. He felt that he had always liked Xiao Qing, loved Xiao Qing, and stuck to Xiao Qing. It was probably his wishful thinking. This was because Xiao Qing had never said that she liked him, nor had she ever promised him anything. It was simply because he had chosen her as his first choice. Even in the past, it was because Xiao Qing had been poisoned that they had such an intimate relationship. In fact, Xiao Qing had never admitted their relationship. Yan Qiue was very depressed. Indeed, that night, Xiao Qing was very gentle to him. She was so gentle that every time he thought about it, he couldn't help but blush. However, Xiao Qing was a person who was cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Even if it was someone else, she would still be so gentle. Therefore, after that night, Xiao Qing refused to have the most intimate relationship with him again. Thinking about it this way, even if he called her darling, and even if others called her sister-in-law or sister-in-law, she would only be indifferent and never respond. Perhaps Xiao Qing would leave at some point, probably after she recovered from her injury. So when he said that he had to find a way to make her recover, she only smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Thinking about it, Yan Qiue became even more depressed. He believed that he had nothing that could make Xiao Qing stay. Money? Power? Xiao Qing didn't care about those things. Strength? Xiao Qing was probably stronger than him. Body? He wanted it, but it didn't mean that Xiao Qing also needed it. Chapter 144. For example, these days, Xiao Qing was a zombie, so she didn't need it at all. He was the one who kept pestering her. However, Xiao Qing was willing to play with him, so she still cared about him. What are you thinking about? Xiao Qing made a fire and couldn't help but glance at Yan Qiue. Yan Qiue's expression just now was very complicated. One moment he was depressed, the next moment he was about to cry, and the next moment he was a little sweet. Xiao Qing wanted to go up and touch his forehead to see if the temperature was wrong. Yan Qiuat coughed softly, but still didn't say out what he was thinking. He just said, "I'm thinking, when can we go out together?" Xiao Qing estimated that when they returned to the base, her injury would be almost healed. It was time to go to the air dye. Parting was close at hand. Xiao Qing couldn't help but say to Yan Qiuat, "I just went to find some non-poisonous mushrooms and made a pot of soup for you. You have to develop the habit of drinking soup when you eat. It's good for your stomach. When you do something in the future, set an alarm. Don't always skip breakfast and lunch, and make your stomach hurt." Yan Qiuat leaned over and snuggled into Xiao Qing's arms. "Just call me in the future. As long as you call me, I'll put aside any important experiments. Besides, haven't you been making soup for me all this time?" Xiao Qing touched Yan Qiuat's soft hair and said in a low voice, "But I will leave sooner or later, don't say it." Yan Qiuat hurriedly interrupted Xiao Qing. His thin eyelids drooped down, covering his beautiful eyes. He didn't mention it, but Xiao Qing wanted to. Why did she have to break his fantasy? She didn't even let him have dreams. "Even if you don't say it, I will leave." Xiao Qing said faintly, "My body has almost recovered. After I send you back to the base, I will go find my family." Yan Qiuat curled up into a ball in Xiao Qing's arms, looking very pitiful. Even though he was tall and thin, he was still a man. He curled up into a ball and trembled slightly. Xiao Qing couldn't help but hug him and said softly, "Thank you for these days. If there's a chance, I'll come back to see you." Yan Qiuat didn't say anything else. He just trembled. It was as if he had returned to the day he killed his adoptive father with his own hands. Everyone saw him acting pitiful in front of the police, but no one saw that after everyone left, he curled himself into a small ball and trembled in his bed all night. And now, he was even more despairing than he was back then. How could this person be so heartless? He could give up just like that. Yes, because he didn't care, even if he threw it away casually, it didn't matter. Xiao Qing felt that something was wrong. She pushed aside the loose hair in front of Yan Qiuat's eyes, revealing his delicate eyebrows. When Yan Qiuat was in front of her, he had always been weak and submissive. Even after some intense things happened, he would show a vulnerable and sexy side. But there was never a time like this where Xiao Qing felt that he was so weak that he would break with a touch. Xiao Qing had never met this type of man before. So when they were together, she had always treated him with her clumsy gentleness. But now, Xiao Qing was at a loss. She held his face. Those beautiful eyes were dark and unfocused. Xiao Qing had heard Yan Qiuat talk about his past, including the killing of his adoptive father. Now, Xiao Qing knew that Yan Qiuat still cared about it. There was still a knot in his heart. And now, this knot had exploded. "Wake up." Xiao Qing frowned and whispered. After a long time, Yan Qiuat finally woke up a little. He curled up into a ball and buried his head in his knees. He looked panicked and helpless. Chapter 145. He was going to be abandoned anyway, so why should he struggle? Xiao Qing was a little anxious. She felt that she might have hurt Yan Qiuat. Now she was afraid that if she left, this cute man who called her baby with a sweet voice would break down. When they first met, Xiao Qing didn't think that she would have such a deep impact on a man, so she didn't worry about what would happen to this man if she left. "Yan Qiuat, wake up." Xiao Qing pinched Yan Qiuat's chin and bit hard on Yan Qiuat's collarbone, leaving a shallow bite mark. There was even a little blood oozing out of the bite mark. Yan Qiuat trembled and couldn't help but raise a hand to cover his eyes. His fragile appearance was very pitiful. After a long time, he asked in a hoarse voice with a hint of fear, can't you not leave? You can bring your family over. Do you have a boyfriend? I won't tell him what happened between us. I just want to look at you. I can even look at you from afar. I don't have a boyfriend, but I have a child and many friends. When you met me, you saw my situation. They are probably injured, so I have to go back. Xiaoqing said softly, I live in the S-City survivor base. I can promise you that if you want, you can move here. If you don't want, I will come back to see you after I settle my family. Yan Qiue, who was prepared to be abandoned, moved his hand away. His red eyes looked like a rabbit that didn't get to eat a carrot, but now they were shining. What did you just say? I said, if you are willing to move here, we can live together. My house in the S-City survivor base is a little small. If you move here, I will apply for a bigger house. If you don't want to move here, it's okay. I will come to see you often. Xiaoqing just finished speaking, and Yan Qiue, who was originally very dispirited, threw himself at her. He rolled in her arms. Are you going to give up on me? Xiaoqing was almost thrown to the ground by him. She quickly caught him. No, I'm just worried that you are happy here and don't want to leave. If that's the case, if I say that I want to take you away and you don't want to leave, it will be a slap in my face. No, I will follow you wherever you go. Yan Qiue was suddenly happy. He thought that he was going to be abandoned again. Fortunately, Xiaoqing was not going to abandon him. Yan Qiue, who was relaxed, lay in Xiaoqing's arms contentedly and asked in a low voice, Do you have a baby? How old is he? What does he like? Do you need me to bring something for him? Xiaoqing stirred the fire and then said, My son is 1 year old this year. He was born after I became a zombie, so his physique is different from ordinary people. Although he was born less than a year ago, he looks like a 4 or 5-year-old child. You don't need to bring anything for him. In addition, I also raised a zombie called Dai. He doesn't bite, but he's very clingy. I also adopted a very pitiful girl called Xiaotong. She's very introverted and doesn't know how to speak. Lastly, she's my teammate. I have a team of ability users. Other than my family, the members are Yan Hanqing, Gu Chuan, and Gu Panpan. You will see them when you see them. Yan Qiue quickly made a list in his heart. From the order of a person's introduction, he could see the position of the people she introduced in her heart. Therefore, even if those people mentioned by Xiaoqing were very important to her, there should be a ranking. This ranking should be her son, then Dai, Xiaotong, and finally her teammates. Chapter 146. An Dai of the same kind as Xiaoqing sounded very threatening. Since Xiaotong was a girl, the threat could be eliminated. In that case, Yan Qiue's goal was to successfully enter the position in Xiaoqing's heart, which was second only to Little Bun. Yan Qiue had already started to plan before he even moved in. Xiaoqing looked at Yan Qiue's thoughtful expression and couldn't help but laugh. What are you worried about? Don't worry, you're very cute. They will like you. Yan Qiue was instantly killed by "you're very cute." He was still thinking about the trick of palace intrigue, but in an instant, he became shy. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly heard very faint footsteps in the dark. His expression immediately turned cold and he shouted, "Who is it?" "It's me." A person walked out from the dark. It was the young man who questioned Xiaoqing earlier. He slowly walked over. Yan Qiue was originally relieved, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. The young man's face was frighteningly pale, and his expression and footsteps were very stiff. He couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you run away with Xiao Mo? Why are you here?" "We got separated." The young man's voice was hoarse, and his eyes were unfocused when he spoke. Just as he approached, he was blocked by an air wall formed by Yan Qiue. "Who exactly are you?" "Oh no, what are you?" The young man's mouth twitched, and even his smile was very stiff. "I'm your companion." As soon as the last word was said, he suddenly opened his mouth and stuck out a long, bright red tongue. It instantly broke through Yan Qiue's air barrier, and its target was Xiaoqing. Yan Qiue's expression turned cold, and a surge of power surged out, directly condensing the air around the tongue. Xiaoqing quickly pulled out her military knife and jumped up. The knife was sharp, and in a flash, the long red tongue was cut off. The young man let out an inhuman cry, and his eyes instantly turned into the slit pupils of a snake. His forelimbs were on the ground, and he quickly pounced towards Xiaoqing. From the start, his target was very clear, which was Xiaoqing. Xiaoqing also did not understand what this thing was, but her reaction was very fast. She stretched out her hand, and vines drilled out from the ground, quickly binding the youth's forelimbs. Yan Qiue very tacitly stretched out his hand and grabbed, condensing the air around the youth's body. His 5 fingers quickly closed, and the youth's body seemed to have been stuffed with a bomb, quickly exploding. After the explosion, a slender white thing quickly burrowed into the ground. No one knew where it went. "What the hell is that?" Yan Qiue said with some difficulty. He had never seen anything that could control a corpse and make it speak. It was very obvious that the youth was already dead before he appeared in front of them. Xiaoqing did not know either. She vigilantly released Dehua, and then said, "I'll keep watch tonight. Have a good sleep. If it comes in the middle of the night and you're very tired, we'll lose half of our combat power." Yan Qiue also knew that Xiaoqing had a special body. Even if she did not sleep for a few nights, it would be fine. He did not pretend to be strong, and just stretched out his hand to Xiaoqing like a spoiled child. "Hug me to sleep, okay." Xiaoqing was expressionless. She had always been amenable to coaxing, but not coercion. In the end, she was completely under Yan Qiue's control. "Sleep well and don't move." Yan Qiue immediately nodded obediently. Then, he suddenly knelt down and quickly kissed Xiaoqing's lips. "Good-night kiss." Then, he quickly lay down. Xiaoqing was very helpless. She picked him up again and spread a blanket on the ground. Then, she hugged Yan Qiue and sat down. Yan Qiue rested his head on Xiaoqing's legs and closed his eyes in satisfaction. When Xiaoqing lowered her head, she could see his delicate facial features, especially his thin and gorgeous red lips. She could not help but think of that night when Yan Qiue knelt beside her sincerely. His warm lips and flexible tongue. Xiaoqing shivered and coughed to cover it up. In that aspect, she was actually a very cold person. However, after meeting Yan Qiue, it was as if she had been infected. She actually thought of such dirty things. Yan Qiue secretly opened his eyes and glanced at Xiaoqing's cold eyes. She had the same expression almost all day long. She looked like she did not want anyone to get close to her. However, Yan Qiue had been with her for a long time. Gradually, he could distinguish many subtle things from her unchanging expression. For example, now, Xiaoqing was absent-minded and a little shy. Could it be? At this moment, Yan Qiue's thoughts were synchronized with Xiaoqing's. He stuck out his pink tongue and licked his red lips. Like a seductive fox demon, he said to Xiaoqing, "The moonlight is just right. Master, do you need me to serve you?" Then, Yan Qiue was slapped by Xiaoqing. "Sleep. Get enough energy. Don't think about nonsense. There is still a monster secretly watching you." Yan Qiue could not help but feel a little resentful. If it were not for that monster, he might have seduced Ah Qing until she could not control herself tonight. No matter what, he must kill that monster to relieve the hatred in his heart. Go to sleep. Xiao Qing covered the fire. Although the fire could drive away many wild beasts, it could also attract many wild beasts that were not afraid of light. Xiao Qing covered up the fire until it was very weak, so there wasn't much warmth. Xiao Qing was afraid that Yan Qiue would catch a cold after sleeping, so she took out a thick cotton-padded coat from her space and covered Yan Qiue with it. His body was very weak. He could not stand the torment. If he caught a cold, it would be very harmful to his body. Thinking of this, Xiao Qing touched her chin. She could not whip him every day. Although she controlled her strength very well every time, it was also harmful to his body. Now that Xiao Qing had put Yan Qiue under her wing and was ready to help him recover, then, abstinence was also necessary. It was decided so happily. Chapter 147. The first half of the night was very peaceful, and even the faint sound of insects could not be heard. Xiao Qing knew very well that there was definitely a very terrifying monster lurking in the dark. Otherwise, how could there not be even the sound of insects in this jungle? In the second half of the night, Xiao Qing keenly heard a strange sound. It was very strange and muffled, as if someone was digging a hole. She instantly became vigilant and grabbed the handle of the military knife. The big flower, which was originally protecting its head with two big leaves and looked like it was sleeping, also suddenly became vigilant and opened its petals. Yan Qiue also woke up, but he did not speak. He narrowed his eyes and was already brewing his superpower in the palm of his hand. After a while, a corner of the quilt suddenly broke, and a milky white tentacle drilled out of the ground. The tentacle was very fast. After it drilled out, it flew in the direction of Xiao Qing. Yan Qiue's movements were even faster. He suddenly stretched out his hands and put the tentacle between them. He suddenly activated his superpower and directly fixed the tentacle. This time, the tentacle did not wait for Xiao Qing to make a move. It suddenly shook, and Yan Qiue's air barrier was broken. Seeing that the tentacle was about to penetrate Yan Qiue's neck, Xiao Qing threw the military knife over. The knife grazed the tip of Yan Qiue's nose and cut off the front part of the tentacle. Milky white liquid immediately spurted out. Yan Qiue hurriedly rolled backwards to avoid the spray of liquid. His eyes were indeed sharp. The liquid was poisonous. As soon as it landed on the quilt, it instantly corroded the quilt until there was no trace of it left. Cold sweat appeared on Yan Qiue's forehead. When he raised his head again, he saw that the tentacle wriggled and grew out again. Damn, isn't this the same as being invincible? Xiao Qing was very focused on holding the military knife. With a wave of her other hand, the green vines flew out and entangled with the tentacle. The tentacle quickly burrowed back into the ground. Xiao Qing's vines missed, but she was not discouraged. She pulled Yan Qiue and guarded the surroundings vigilantly. God knows when the tentacle would suddenly burrow out again. The surroundings were silent. After a long time, the tentacle still didn't come out. Yan Qiue's tense heartstrings immediately tensed up even more. He asked in a low voice, "What exactly is this thing?" Just as he spoke, the ground beneath Xiao Qing's feet loosened, and the white tentacles emerged again, attempting to entangle her legs. Xiao Qing quickly took a step back. She didn't have time to pick up the military knife in the distance, so she used the vines as a whip and threw them out. She had been trained by Yan Qiue for the past 2 days. She was already very good at playing with whips. As soon as the vine whip was thrown out, it entangled with the white tentacle and tightened. The tentacle, which had failed in its attack and was trying to burrow back into the ground, was entangled by Xiao Qing. That thing was exceptionally strong. Xiaoqing staggered. She hurriedly exerted force with her feet to stabilize her body and then pulled out with all her might. Xiaoqing could see that there was still a section buried under the tentacle. This tentacle had the ability to regenerate. Although she couldn't tell for the time being how many times it could regenerate, it would grow back again and again after being hit. Not to mention other things, it would consume a lot of energy. Therefore, in order to think of a way to deal with it, she first had to see clearly what it was. Xiaoqing exerted force and pulled out another section of the tentacle. That tentacle was like a taut rubber band. When Yan Qiue saw this, he hurriedly helped Xiaoqing. Their combined strength was stronger than the tentacle. It desperately tried to pull back, but it was still pulled out section by Xiaoqing. Chapter 148. At this time, the big flower moved closer. It knew what its master was going to do, so it didn't bite. Instead, it dripped a drop of digestive fluid from the flower's head. The digestive fluid was very corrosive. As soon as it touched the tentacle, white smoke rose. The tentacle shrank in pain, and then the whole thing was pulled out by Xiaoqing and Xiaomu. As soon as it was pulled out, Xiaoqing saw the appearance of this thing. It was simply a big white maggot. There were two small dots at the bottom, which should be its eyes. Its mouth was open, showing its jagged sharp teeth. What the hell was this? A big white maggot that could control corpses. Could it be that it was the same as what was written in those grave-robbing novels? What kind of corpse maggot was that? Yan Qiue gasped when he saw this thing. Xiaoqing didn't know it, but he knew it. He was very keen on studying the mutated animals and plants after the apocalypse. It could be said that he could roughly describe most of the mutated animals. He had seen a small one before. A long time ago, their base had gone to the city to complete a mission. After returning from the mission, one of the members suddenly went crazy and bit his companion who was sleeping in the same room as him to death. After subduing him, Qiao Mo sent him to Yan Qiue. He wanted Yan Qiue to see what had happened to him. Yan Qiue dissected the man and found a worm at the position of his energy source. It was a small version of this big white maggot. One of its heads was connected to the nerves of the brain, and the other head was drilled into the energy core. The energy core was almost sucked dry by it. Yan Qiue studied the worm in detail and found that this kind of worm could control corpses. However, the corpses that were controlled would rot like normal corpses. If the controlled man and his companions hadn't fought zombies for so long, their bodies would have been covered in zombie blood and a rotten smell. Otherwise, they would have been discovered long ago. Unfortunately, the worm died after being tortured by him. He hadn't figured out what kind of species it was, but one thing was clear: this kind of worm could only live in rotten flesh. If it lost its host, it would die if it didn't find a corpse to live in for a long time. Yan Qiue quickly told her what he knew. Xiaoqing couldn't help but frown. It wasn't her fault. It was just that this thing was too disgusting. Even when it was tied up, it kept opening and closing its sharp teeth, spitting out yellow mucus. The yellow mucus was very corrosive. When it landed on Xiaoqing's vines, it almost corroded them. The white worm turned its head abruptly and bit the vine. Its sharp teeth could bite through the energy crystal core, so biting off a vine was a piece of cake for it. The white worm bit off the vines and wanted to run away, but the big flower that was waiting for it bit the lower half of its body. The worm was quite ruthless. Like a gecko that had its tail cut off, it left the lower half of its body and burrowed into the ground. It ran away. Xiaoqing said with a frown. If they didn't deal with it once, it wouldn't dare to come out. However, it would definitely tail them and wait for an opportunity to attack them. This was really a very annoying thing. Xiaoqing picked up the big flower that had secretly swallowed half of the white worm. She washed its flower head several times with water before putting it away. There's still some time before dawn. You can sleep for a while. It won't dare to come out for a while. Xiaoqing took out a new quilt and changed it to a clean place. I'm not going to sleep. Yan Qiue sat down next to Xiaoqing energetically, then said, let's talk. In fact, most of the time, Yan Qiue was talking and Xiaoqing was listening.